Working on the railways, but my story's not the railway children. It's rags to riches with a twist.
My grandfather was a butler, which is from the French boutelier, which meant that he ordered the wine into the houses that he worked at, which is exactly what I do nowadays.
10 famous faces trace the roots of their family trees to discover who they really are. Who Do You Think You Are? Starts Tuesday at 9 on BBC Two.
The adventures continue.
The Himalayan Queen will take me only 57 miles, but we will climb 7,000 feet. I've been granted a one-to-one audience with His Holiness, but before that he's agreed to meet 700 other people.
Your face very familiar to me because of BBC.
Oh, really?
Himalaya with Michael Palin, Sunday at 9 on BBC One Scotland.
Well, it's been a long time coming, but now on BBC One Scotland, we join Jackie Baird for the royal opening of Holyrood.
Good morning and welcome to Holyrood. It's a big day for Scotland's Parliament, and what will unfold this morning is a mixture of informality and pageantry. At 2 hours from now, Her Majesty the Queen will walk up these stairs and into the debating chamber just behind me to declare the Holyrood Parliament officially open. And now that the cladding and all the scaffolding is gone, we can see Enrique Morales' vision. Already architects have hailed it as a work of art, a thrilling masterpiece, Britain's most important new building. But after all the controversy and the long wait, will we, the Scottish people, take Holyrood to our hearts? Will it become a symbol of national pride? Well, what more can be said of this structure that hasn't already been said in acres of newsprint and on hours of TV? Well, personally, being here, it's like meeting a celebrity. You've heard so much about them, you feel you already know them. But nothing really prepares you for the real thing, and we'll be seeing lots more of what's within these walls very, very shortly. But meanwhile, the spectators, they're already gathering just along the Royal Mile. Edinburgh is looking its best along in this bright October morning. You can see the car there carrying Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. There's a bit of a party going on in the street, though, with bands and theatre groups. The theme of today is Old to New, a riding, a procession of dignitaries, school children, MSPs and local heroes will set off from the old Scottish Parliament. That's near the top of the Royal Mile to the new Parliament, where we are 3/4 of a mile away at the very foot of the Royal Mile. And that limo bearing the crown of Scotland will bring up the rear of the procession, escorting it 6 archers and all the pomp and circumstance of a royal opening. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, of course, will sit out and they will watch it past. Well, the Queen, as we can see, she's left already the Palace of Holyrood House to travel to Parliament Hall by car for the first part of the ceremony. So we all await her arrival. Now, it's a big day for the Scottish Parliament, and also a big day for the architect and designer Benedetta Tagliabue. She is, of course, the wife of the late Enrique Morales, the man whose vision created Parliament. So, Benedetta, a big day for the Parliament, but obviously a huge day and a very poignant day for you.
A very incredible day for me, yes. I'm very happy.
Can you sum up your feelings? Because it must be a feeling of celebration, but also tinged with sadness that your husband couldn't be here.
Of course, it's all together. It's like a party, no? This kind of a party of celebration, also dedicated to someone who is not here. But he's not here, but he's here, very present. His ideas and his aspirations are here.
Well, your children are here today. You've brought them over to see Mummy and Daddy's dream. Have they had a chance to see this place, even from the outside?
Not yet.
They
but
must be impressed. The Queen is coming to open Daddy's building.
Absolutely. They are very impressed. And they will be with the cousins and with the family, grandmother and aunties, so they will be here soon.
We're going to see an awful lot more of the building later in the programme, but come on, what's your favourite part of it?
I love very much the public piazza, you know, this place which was not ready until today. Today, the landscape and the piazza and the lakes are ready, and people will notice that this makes a real change. The Palace of the Queen was never seen in this way, and now the palace has a neighbor, and it's a neighbor which I believe it's at the same level. No? They have a real conversation.
Beautiful. Well, we wish you well, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Benedetta, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's take a look outside now, because I think we can see the Queen is still making her way up to Parliament Square, just past the magnificent St Giles Cathedral there. The national anthem is already being played for her arrival. And I'm joined now by commentator Roddy Martin. Roddy, this is a day where Edinburgh really comes into its own. Its architecture and everything surrounding it. It really likes the big occasion, doesn't it?
I think it's a very important day for the people of Scotland. This event in years to come will be written about and it will be filmed. This is a very signature moment in the history of our nation. 397 years ago, the Earl of Seafield said, when they dissolved the Scottish Parliament, that this was the end of an old sang. Well, this is the beginning of a new sang, and let's all hope that it's a good one.
Certainly, as we see the Queen there meeting the Lord Provost, Leslie Hines, and the role, of course, today as the Lord Lieutenant of Edinburgh. And Jack McConnell, the First Minister, resplendent in that rather more traditional kilt than perhaps we've seen him wear in the past.
I've seen him wear that in America.
And of course, we see George Reid there chatting to Leslie, the presiding officer of the Scottish Parliament. We have a fine day for it. The rain has stayed away. They're walking across the magnificent Parliament Square West. Look, there we see it now in the background, the the headquarters of Lothian Regional Council. Parliament Square West only looks as magnificent as it does today. For 100 years, 150 years, it used to be the home of lots of shops and small traders.
Yes, and it was built on the old graveyard of St Giles, the kirk. Remodeled, I think, in the 16th century very extensively.
Now the royal party walking across the square to the door of the Signet Library,
which opens into the corridor of the Parliament Hall.
Indeed it does. We can't actually see Parliament Hall from here, can we?
No,
we're now
no.
meeting the deputies of the presiding officer, MSPs Trish Godman and Murray Tosh. As we said, Parliament View hidden. There's a very short corridor there. Last week, I know for a fact, they were furiously repainting it.
That's one of the great advantages of a royal opening. They get out the paint.
And there we see the magnificent ceiling of Parliament Hall, said on which the ceiling of the new Parliament.
Indeed, 60 feet above the ground. 122 feet long.
There's not a single nail in it.
Not at all.
All held together by wooden pegs.
That was building in 400 years ago. And the fine stained glass window, which is just going out of sight.
This was built, Parliament Hall was built at the behest of Charles I and completed in 1639. And it's where, of course, the Scottish Parliament sat until it voted to merge itself with England, controversially, in 1707. Many Scottish MPs voted for the Union in return. Some of them were a bit of a backhander.
The country was actually bankrupt at the time, so they had to do something to get themselves out of the mess. But I think that was a bit extreme.
It certainly was. A parcel of rogues. I think Burns thought it was a bit extreme.
Yes.
As we're seeing the stained glass window now. 8,000 individual pieces of glass in that window depicting the first ever meeting,
inauguration of the College of Justice.
There you go.
By James V.
I'm with an expert.
James V, the son of James IV, who was probably the best King of Scots that they'd had to date.
It's all dressed up for the occasion today, but generally that hall is used as a sort of ante-room for the courts, isn't it? It's where the advocates
yes,
brief their law.
and where they have their parties.
Oh, is it where they have their parties? They didn't tell me that when I was doing the tour. It was all business as usual. We can see some of Scotland's MSPs awaiting the arrival of the Queen. Wendy Alexander there. Jackie Bailey to her right. It is looking spectacular. Some wonderful, wonderful statues, including... Go on then, let's just start at return.
Well, the
famous writer whose statues there, who used to work as an advocate.
Walter Scott, indeed.
Sir Walter
yes,
Scott.
Yes. And fine paintings of the Lord Justice Generals and the Presidents of the Council.
Here's the fanfare introducing Her Majesty the Queen.
Led in by the Court of the Lord Lion, with the Carrick Pursuivant in front.
And a few journalists who I think have got themselves lost along the way.
Yes, but the archers are there to make sure it's okay, and the bodyguard. There are 4 heralds, I believe, in attendance with the Lord Lion, King of Arms.
Very much a ceremonial post these days.
I think it's very important. Well, the Lord Lion is actually the master of patents, and he's the organiser of all major royal ceremonials in Scotland. So he does have a bit of work cut out for him.
And we can see there the Crown of Scotland, officially signed out this morning by the Duke of Hamilton, its bearer.
The 15th Duke of Hamilton, whose ancestor, the 5th Duke of Hamilton, led the opposition.
And the Queen will now be welcomed by the presiding officer, George Reid.
Your Majesty, our Queen of Scots, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, people of Scotland. Today the whole community of this realm, people, Parliament and Palace, will participate together in writing a new page in Scotland's story. We start here under the hammer-beam roof of the old Scots Parliament, the first custom-built legislature in the British Isles. We finish under the magnificent oak-beam ceiling of the new Scots Parliament, the most modern legislature in the British Isles and indeed in the world. Between these two buildings comes the riding, a distinct Scottish custom dating back to at least the 1520s, in which the Crown of Scotland is paraded through the streets to the Parliament. In these streets this morning, ma'am, and in the riding, our old soldiers and our young carers, our captains of industry, our people in their very first jobs, gold medalists bursting with health, and others for whom the riding will be an Olympian effort, world academics and young Scots with learning difficulties, landowners and crofters who've just bought their own island, civic representatives from our great cities, and others from tiny voluntary groups. Old Scots from families who have lived here for 1,000 years, and new Scots born elsewhere for whom this country now is home. Truly, Scotland is diverse, a tartan nation of many interwoven strands. And for the nation, today is a day of great expectations. I call the Right Honourable the Lord Cullen of Whitekirk, Lord President of the Court of Session.
Well, they seem to be having technical problems, even in ancient Parliament Hall with all its modern day technology. Lord Cullen is, of course, the custodian of Parliament Hall.
That's correct. This is the old Parliament, not the new one.
And we understand that his speech today mainly deals with the tremendous history of it, doesn't it? Of the fact that it did house
Exactly.
the ancient Parliament right up until 1707. Well, let's just leave the interior of the hall for the moment while they get the technical problem sorted out, or while we do, in fact. And let's go to my colleague, Glenn Campbell, who's enjoying the atmosphere outside. Glenn, what's happening?
Well, there are plenty of people lining the streets here at the top end of the Royal Mile, people from here in Edinburgh, from across Scotland and beyond, to catch a glimpse of the guests, the Queen and the other dignitaries that are here today and take part in a day of celebration as we prepare for the official opening of Holyrood. I'm joined by two people from Scotland who both were here for the opening of Parliament back in 1999. They are Ishbel McFarlane from Kinross and Jack Lovey, who's from Irvine. Ishbel, I don't mean to be rude, but you're wearing a pretty old jumper, a jumper that's at least 5 years old. Just tell me the story of that.
Yeah, well, I got this jumper as I was representing my school in the procession in '99 when the Parliament opened up at the Mound, and all the school pupils who were there with the banners, etc., were wearing the same jumper, so I've kept mine and wear it with pride.
And obviously that was a big day for you. Why have you been so determined to come back and be here for today's celebrations?
Well, the day was, yeah, as you say, a very big day, and I was very impressed by the whole attitude. And I'm now at university in Edinburgh, and I went to the Parliament building, and it just blew me away, because I went with a sort of sceptical attitude, and the building, the architecture, the debating hall, it was just spectacular, and so I felt really it was my duty to come and support the whole thing.
Well, I know you've had a glimpse, Jack Lovey, of the building yourself. What do you make of it?
I think it is a magnificent building. People say it's different, but I think it'll grow on Scotland. A big asset to Scotland. The cost doesn't particularly bother me, because I think if you want something good, you have to pay for it. And I think in years to come, this will be seen as a magnificent building, which is an asset to our country.
And here you are today for the official opening of the building. How has it been for you so far?
The day, yeah, excellent. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I'm across here with my wife. We were here in '99, somewhat too old to have represented my school then, actually. But here in '99, and thoroughly enjoyed that. Wouldn't have missed the day.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Celebration there right across the generations. So the riding from Old Parliament Hall at the top of the Royal Mile to the new Parliament at Holyrood at the bottom should begin in, well, about 15 minutes' time or so. But what about the origins of this riding? Here's Reva Alderson.
In courtly procession, lairds, lords, barons, bishops and the eminent burghers of the land. In the National Library of Scotland, the French illustrator Nicolas de Godeville pictures the people of the 17th century Scots Parliament. Accompanied by the honours of Scotland, the sword, the sceptre and crown, they processed from the royal palace at Holyrood to mark the beginning and end of the parliamentary session. It was a spectacle seen regularly until 1707, when the Scots Parliament dissolved itself in the Act of Union. It was the riding to Parliament, a spectacular sight. And this is where they arrived, at the top of the Royal Mile, Parliament Hall, now the heart of the Supreme Courts of Justice. It was a grand ceremony designed to show Scotland could easily outdo the pomp of the English elite.
This elaborate procession then rides slowly up the Royal Mile, and it is a royal mile. Both words are significant. It goes through the great Netherbow Port, Edinburgh's largest, most important gateway, the East Port. It has, in the process, been cleared of its markets. This is now a royal procession route.
The spectacular beams of the old Parliament Hall provide inspiration for the roof of the new Parliament, so there's a link with history, but still the emphasis is on whose Parliament it is.
Because the Parliament belongs to the people of Scotland. It's their Parliament. It's one of the old traditions of Scots constitutional law. The Parliament belongs to the people. And it's right, I think, if it's a people's Parliament, the riding should contain the people.
And it certainly does. Scots from all walks of life are here today. And perhaps the most famous of them all, Sir Sean Connery. Earlier this morning, Glenn Campbell caught up with him, along with SNP leader Alex Salmond. And Glenn began by asking how today's events compare with those of 5 years ago.
The last time was really marvellous, great moment. But this has much more historical significance now that the building is already there, the Parliament. Can't wait to get inside and see. And then everybody will get inside. And I hope everybody in Scotland gets inside it. In every sense of the word, gets behind it. Not just, I mean, even as recent as yesterday, I saw it being knocked in the media. They never surprise me. I'd love them to surprise me this time. 5 years ago, when we had this wonderful opening, and the marching of these kids, well, they're all voting, not them all, but a lot of them are voting now and coming up for voting. And they're the ones that should be into this Parliament by the schools. They should be in there, whatever religious or whatever else they're being taught, they should be taught about the Parliament. It's now. And then the Parliament hasn't got enough teeth, but they'll get it teeth.
Well, Alex Salmond, what are your thoughts on the opening day of the Parliament, an opportunity to move on?
Well, I mean, Sean and I were here 5 years ago, and like Sean, I thought the children marching was a very symbolic part that day, the rendition of Man's a Man for all that in the ceremony. What I'm looking for today is a revival of that sort of hope and expectation that we had 5 years ago. And just as Sean says, I think some of the difficulties have to be put behind us. I mean, what is here and now, and the children of Scotland performing here and now, and people have to seize the moment and take the Parliament on. So this can be a turning point if people can recapture the hope and expectation of 5 years ago and this time get it right.
Alex Salmond there. Well, those children will be at fever pitch at the moment, I'm sure, because the first riding for 3 centuries is beginning to form. And thank goodness we've got a nice day for it. Well, you've heard him. Now see him in the flesh. It is Roddy Martin, our commentator today, and a well-kent face here, our political editor, Brian Taylor. Brian, it is going to be a difficult tone to set today, isn't it? We all know about the cost of the Parliament and all of that, but it was a case of whether or not to spend too much money on today's ceremony or not enough. Do you think they've got it that right?
I think George Reid has got it right on this, as he got it right in driving forward the completion of this building. He set an extremely tough target to get it ready. Let's never forget this. To get it ready by October the 9th was seen at the time as being unrealistically romantic and impossible. It has actually happened. I think that's a tribute to George Reid. It's a tribute to the hundreds who've worked alongside him. But I think also he described his plans for the day as being a day of quiet Scots dignity. In other words, nothing too grandiose, nothing too pompous. You have to have with the royal presence, you have a certain pomp and splendour. But it's mellowed. It's got an element put into it to change it of the popular vision as well. You know, this place here. I like this particular bit, the garden lobby.
It is lovely. It's very airy, isn't it?
Fantastic. This is the place I've learned to call work. But I think the Parliament should now learn to call it home.
Okay.
And I think the Scottish people should begin to perhaps appreciate the building itself and put the controversy to one side.
Indeed. Do you think the people of Edinburgh, obviously living cheek by jowl to it, do you think they've begun to give it a bit of a warm reception?
Yeah, they're coming together with it. I think the Reverend Charlie Robertson of the Canongate Kirk put it rather well. He said that it had dropped into this particular part of Edinburgh slightly ill at ease with its neighbours, but its neighbours are coming to accept it. Will give it time. Everything has to take time in Scotland, like making whiskey, you know. Takes at least 10 years to mature.
There's the Canongate Church there. I think a few drams have been taken by entertainers outside. They're certainly having a ball anyway. That's members of the Clan Wallace providing the entertainment right up and down the Royal Mile.
I think they're probably there every day, Jackie. It's nothing to do with the riding at all. They just enjoy themselves beating the drums and dancing up and down.
And then we have members of the Scottish Youth Theatre. They're going to be presented to the Queen by royal appointment at such a young age. Immediately she leaves Parliament Hall. Well, if Enrique Morales was the physical architect of the Parliament, its intellectual architect was Donald Dewar, whose shadow looms large over today's events. 5 years ago, at the inauguration of the Parliament, he became Scotland's First Minister. Rightly or wrongly, Holyrood was driven through by his political will, the same persistence he used to help win devolution.
Clause 1 of the bill could not be more definitive. There shall be a Scottish Parliament. I like that.
In May 1999, Donald Dewar became the first minister of the first Scottish Parliament in almost 300 years.
I would very much like to serve Scotland as First Minister.
It was a decidedly historic day, a moment he could take great credit for bringing about. And once Scotland had a parliament, the parliament needed a home. And here it is, the building we see today. Donald Dewar's vision has now become his legacy. It was a few years after this was filmed that some took to calling him the father of the nation. He laid the very foundations of this building, each stone more controversial than the one before. But today is the new Scottish Parliament's big day.
I think he would have loved the fact that the building is so Scottish. It has a grandeur, like the grandeur of the new town, with none of the grandiosity of, there's nothing flowery or gold or ornate. It is simply powerfully Scottish.
So it really is very Donald Dewar, but you can't help thinking that he would have been looking beyond the pageantry of today. He said as much himself.
A Scottish Parliament, not an end, but a means to greater ends.
Donald Dewar. Well, 4 years after their father's death, his children, Marion and Ian, they're here to see his physical legacy, his political vision that he left to the Scottish people. They'll be meeting the Queen shortly in the library that bears their father's name. But they've been speaking to Aileen Clark.
Now, of course, your father famously announced there shall be a Scottish Parliament. I like that. But of course, it's a terrible shame that he's not here to see this opening ceremony for himself. It must be, in a way, a difficult day for the family, Ian.
It will be a bit bittersweet. I always feel a little bit sad when I come to Scotland, because obviously it reminds me of Dad. However, it is a day for celebration, and he would have loved it so much. So I think that's going to be foremost in my mind.
And of course, he thoroughly enjoyed that first opening ceremony on the Mound, didn't he?
He did. He was, I think, probably as happy as I've ever seen him.
Now, Marion, within the Parliament itself, your father is going to be remembered with the Dewar Room, which is going to house a collection of his books. Now, that does sound rather grand, and he was quite a modest soul. What do you think he would have made of it?
Well, I think he would have viewed it all with a certain degree of wry amusement. But at the same time, I think the idea of a reading room located within the Scottish Parliament would have appealed to him. I think he would have been pleased with it. You know, when Dad died, there was such a widespread expression of sadness and affection from people across Scotland. We received literally thousands of letters, and people signed books of condolence, and we weren't able to respond to all the letters, unfortunately, but we very much appreciated getting them. And we just felt that that kind of scale of response demanded something in return, and that's why the idea of creating a permanent memorial for Dad was born. And given that his passion for devolution in Scotland, and of course his passion for books, a scheme which married the two seemed very appropriate.
And it would be no bad thing if occasionally a few books were left lying around in there.
No, indeed. He was famed for his untidiness. However, I'm sure they'll make a lovely job of keeping it clean.
Now, there's no doubt if he was still with us, he would thoroughly enjoy the day, and I dare say he'd thoroughly enjoy the lunch afterwards as well.
Oh, certainly. Certainly. Yes, with any function that Dad went to, it was always the buffet or the lunch or even the canapes, which were the highlight for him.
Thank you very much indeed, Marion and Ian Dewar, and I hope you enjoy the day.
Yeah, indeed. Donald Dewar did like his food. If I was ever at any dinners, the First Minister attended at the same time. He always had his roll eaten before anyone else did, before the dinner started. Brian, of course, Donald Dewar's shadow looms large over today, doesn't it?
It does. He said that he wanted to endow, if you like, Scotland with the new building, and he took some controversy as a consequence of that. He took some agony. I recall being in his presence on one occasion when the criticism of the building project in the early stages was getting so large, and he just sort of had his head down and his hands on his desk, and he thinks, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Well, I think that now, when we see the outcome, with the controversy with the controversy exhausted, and I think exhausted is probably the right word rather than completed, I think that perhaps the legacy is around us, si monumentum requiris circumspice. But I think that also at a call of Donald in 1999, on the opening day on the 1st of July, he was never very keen to get enthused about things. He would always play it down.
Yes.
But as he went down the mound after the great celebrations, after the great opening, I swear I saw his shoulder twitch a little, just a fraction, in tune with the jazz beat of the music as it went down. And I think, he might have just allowed the beginning of a scintilla of a smile to come across the lips. I'm being wicked. He would have enjoyed today thoroughly, particularly, as you say, the grub. But he would have enjoyed, I'm sure, the fact that there is the leavening of popular democracy, the strong leavening of popular democracy within the pomp and pageant that accompanies a royal opening.
Well, indeed, and you say pomp and pageantry, despite all that's gone before, we can see that crowds are truly beginning to build there. They're waiting the Queen to re-emerge from the old Parliament Hall. Roddy, there's a very close relationship between Edinburgh, particularly, and the royal family.
Well, from Queen Victoria onwards, I suppose, and of course George IV chose to come to Edinburgh when he visited Scotland in 1822, the first reigning British monarch to do it for 200 years. I thought it was good. The presiding officer has a great sense of Scottish history, and he referred to the Queen as the Queen of Scots. She's not the Queen of Scotland, she's the Queen of Scots, she's Queen of England. Scotland has no ruler. The Scottish people maintain Scotland. So I think that we must always bear this in mind when we talk about our monarchy.
And of course, 1999, I know we keep harking back to 1999. It was a very warm ceremony. In fact, let's go back into Parliament Hall, where the presiding officer, George Reid, is once again
Your Majesty,
on his feet.
I would wish to thank our party leaders who voiced their aspirations here this morning in Old Parliament Hall. It's time now to start our journey to our new home at Holyrood. I would invite you, ma'am, to join us and the people of Scotland for the start of the riding down the Royal Mile.
Already a grand view there of the court of the Lord Lion. Talk us through them.
The Lord Lion, King of Arms, goes back, the high Seneca to the royal line of Scotland, goes back into the mists of time. The Lord Lion's role today is largely ceremonial, and he's in charge of patents and tartans.
And we're getting a fine view just out of camera shot there. And there it goes. That's always a cue for something to disappear out of camera shot when we're just about to talk about it, the crown. There'll be lots of opportunities later. We can, of course, have a fine view of what the Queen's wearing today.
Yes, it's interesting. Last time she wore the Isle of Skye tartan. I see she's not this year. She's gone for pink, which probably means something. It's a very flattering colour.
It is a very flattering colour. There was much praise for the Queen the last time. Now, there we see members of the Scottish Youth Theatre there who are going to be performing by royal appointment this morning. The Queen emerges from that side door again of the Signet Library. A member of the Royal Company of Archers as her guard. It's a lovely pink. There's a pink and a purple, echoing the purple outfit, I think, of last time.
The purple of royalty, the purple of heather. Slightly darker than heather, I think, but obviously thought out, as is Jack McConnell's kilt.
It's the Holyrood tartan, that kilt, isn't it? Made for him especially by Lochcarron. I think he took...
Is it?
He did. It's a Holyrood tartan made for him by the company Lochcarron. Without being too sort of cheeky about it, he took a certain care with the kilt that he chose today.
Sure
a certain
he did.
Care.
I think the pinstripe is now in the back of his cupboard.
Yes.
Although he has said he'd do it again.
Has he now?
Yes, but you notice he hasn't. Yeah?
Yes, I was there when he did it, and I thought it was a great photo opportunity, but he did it with very good purpose at the time, because he was promoting a young Scottish designer. Yes.
The young people there having a chat to the Duke of Edinburgh. Over 30 young people are involved in this from across Scotland. They have been performing a piece featuring music and dancing. It is depicting Scottish history and culture, focusing on events pre-1707. I think there's a Robert the Bruce in there. We've got Ian MacDonald, he's 18, he's from Thurso. He's playing James I. He said in advance of the occasion, he said, it's going to be nerve-wracking. I'm really looking forward to it. It's something I'll be able to tell my grandchildren about in years to come.
You know, Jackie, that in the days of the old Scottish Parliament, the King and the Kings and the monarchy generally didn't just open the Parliament, they took part. Now, some of them just sort of said, my benison upon you, off you go and have a good Parliament.
Yes.
But where people like James I, and particularly James IV, were legendary for actually taking part and arguing and fighting. And a colleague of mine who works at St Andrews University, who's doing research into the old Scots Parliament, said James IV, he talks about him as if he was a personal friend. James IV, literally, you couldn't get him to shut up. In Parliament Hall, he really would want to take part in all the debates and all the arguments.
Very young spectator. I wonder if she'll remember very much of today's events. The actor who plays Robert the Bruce, he also had a few words to say. He said, I don't normally get nervous before a performance, but this one is going to be pretty special. It's not every day you get the chance to perform in front of the Queen and Sean Connery. And the same, I can't wait.
Someone I was speaking to were bringing the young child to the occasion and asked about what would be the big events of the day. And she said, I'm getting to see the Queen and Indiana Jones's dad. And that's Sean Connery. You know? For a certain generation, he's not James Bond.
Indeed it is. Lots of people, oh gosh. Full house, I think, in the Royal Mile. Well, from what we can see so far.
The sun's come out.
What a street of history. In doing just some of the research for this, it's almost a soap opera for the centuries, isn't it? There's a story around every corner.
You think of all the feet that have tramped that street and all the things that have taken place and all the
heads that have come off in that square.
Oh, indeed, Montrose, Argyll, all the great figures of Scots history.
Now we've swept down to the toll booth at the bottom of the hill. Again, the crowds are even beginning to gather there. Now, the Queen is crossing the cobbles. I do know that they spent a lot of time over the past few days filling in some of the cracks and some of the holes, because obviously
I was there.
Taking cognizance of heels.
I was there last night and they were still working on it.
Were they?
Yes, there were things going on.
There's a special dais been set up there where the Queen is going to sit and watch most of the riding go past. Oh, having a chat with the spectators. Lots of cameras flashing, always at the ready.
In front of the City Chamber buildings.
It's very informal, isn't it? Very informal.
The monarchy in Scotland traditionally should be.
Yes, that young chap doesn't know what's happening, I don't think.
He's waiting for Sean Connery, probably. Who's Indiana Jones's dad?
Who's the wifey in the hat?
Parliament Square of so much history. I mentioned the heads coming off, but obviously we've got the heart of Midlothian among those cobbles.
The site of the Tron where people were taken to be imprisoned before being taken to the scaffold.
And in a charming habit, Edinburgh citizens still spit upon the place. I think some of them think they're doing it because they're Hibs fans, but actually it's going back to a longer tradition of it, because it was a place of torture and a place of torment for the citizens.
Brian Taylor, we're watching the Queen and you're lowering the tone.
I know, I always do. Rely upon me, Jackie.
But they still carry out that awful tradition,
as they walk by. But
they do. I was there.
By,
and a group of Americans were aghast.
Yes. But walk down Princess Street, it happens there too.
That is a lovely outfit. Obviously well dressed for a sunny but chilly October morning. Little chap with his denim jacket and his kilt. Anything goes.
Yes.
What was it they said about this ceremony? It's going to be a mix of the old and the new.
Mix of the old and the new.
Pageantry with a bit of a twist.
Well, when you think about it, when the old Parliament was dissolved, this scene that we're watching now was a riot. People were bashing one another about, and they were looking for the commissioners who had to take refuge in the cellar down the road.
Who would have thought 1707, 300 years later?
397 years later.
Thank you for that.
I had to count them up last night.
We'd be back here for such a
And it was October.
warm spectacle.
Well,
Was
the
it
debate
October?
took place throughout October. I think it began on the 3rd of October.
I've just been handed news just in, as they say. The Queen is wearing cerise pink jersey jacket with matching wool hat. The hat is of toning cerise and purple, and it's designed by Hardy Amys, the Queen's old favourite. And I bet it's warm. I bet it's warm.
I just like the sense, the sense for the riding. I like particularly. I mean, obviously, it hasn't begun formally yet. She's still getting ready for it. But I like this sense of coming home because the riding of the old days started in 1639 when the new building, Parliament Hall, was then a new, spanking new building. There was probably a hideous controversy about the cost, and they probably said the hammer beam roof was disgraceful.
Do you know there was? But we will deal with that
really?
later. Yes, there
really? It was commissioned in 1633. It took 6 years to build. They probably said, "Oh, for goodness' sake, are you ever going to finish it?" You know. But anyway, 1639 they started the riding, and it went from Holyrood Palace up to Parliament Square, and today it's going back. And also to be even more sort of delving back into history, in 1326, Robert the Bruce convened a parliament in Holyrood Palace. Right. So I think there's a sense of coming back down the road.
Steeped in history, indeed.
And there's a great irony, and the man that led the 1707 Act was the Duke of Queensberry, and of course his house is now being hijacked in this wonderful building that we're in today.
Indeed.
Yes.
I wonder how that would have gone down.
Yes.
Talking of the roof, Brian, the entire old Parliament Hall cost £10,555. Now, I don't know what that is in today's money. Perhaps someone at home can email us, as we're very fond of saying these days, how much that is in today's...
That would be pound Scots, probably, as well, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Yeah. But they ran out of money before they got to the ceiling. So the architect hot-footed it down to Leith Docks. There was a boat coming in full of Scandinavian timber. Bit of wheeling and dealing, not quite nicked them. I'll have a bit of that, thank you very much. Off he went, very happy, thank you.
You're not telling us that our ancient parliament has dodgy timber off the back of a lorry?
Well, there's another story about that, because they obviously have to keep an eye on ancient buildings, and they checked the roof thoroughly just a couple of years ago, just when they were refurbishing the roof, the stained glass window.
Yes.
Not an inch of rot, not an inch of decay. Perfect.
I hope we can say that up the road in 297 years.
Well,
even more in that case. Yeah.
Well, I don't think any of us will be around to take the flak.
She must be just arriving at the city chambers there.
And
Constables of Edinburgh.
The High Constables of Edinburgh.
The Lord Provost as well.
Yes.
That's a rather fetching dice. That was only put up late last night, was it?
No, it was up at 11 o'clock last night when I went past it, and in fact I thought that there was an old tramp sleeping in a corner of it, but I presume he's been ejected by now. It's right in front of the city chambers.
Now there's going to be a fly past any second now. It's a Nimrod from RAF Kinloss 201 Squadron, which will be making its way over the city. I think we can see it now at the top left-hand side of your picture. Almost there. Brushing past the castle. The pilot is 31-year-old Steve Ross from Tariff. We may be taking a bit of a detour. Well, he's got every right to enjoy himself because his mum and dad are here, which is a nice touch. There. Steve has been flying Nimrods for 5 years. His plane is 25 years old. And of course, 201 Squadron are famous for liberating Guernsey.
Yes. It's a fine sight.
Rather elegant fly past. Again, a sense of changing times. 1999, the fly past.
Red Arrows.
Red Arrows and Concord.
Which is now in a museum.
Indeed. What a moment that must be for Steve's mum and dad and the crowd. I bet they're nudging people they're standing beside saying, "That's my boy.
That's my boy.
That's my boy."
Yes.
And that's the view, or almost the view, that Steve would have enjoyed over the past couple of minutes.
Isn't that lovely to see the green laid out there? Laid out very, very hastily, I have to say, and with great skill by the workforce in the last couple of days, just beside the new building, new Parliament building.
Yesterday afternoon they were unrolling the turf. I suppose that's what they mean by rolling lawns, is it?
Yes.
So they're awaiting the riding. Let's talk about the history of this riding.
The original one, Jackie, was obviously a more formal occasion, but today it's involving people from all the airts of Scotland. I mean, as well as the High Hedians, the great and the good, the council leaders, the diplomats, etc. The main thing that gets me, the main attraction to me, is the section known as the local heroes. In other words, those who have been nominated by their MSP. We spoke to one, George Rees, local hero, who works so well and so hard for travel for people with disabilities in our area. There are others, involved in care and in work and community work, and I think it's a great day for them. They're taking part along with the bands, the parades, 16 banners from all across the regions of Scotland, a military presence, a religious presence, as I said, local authorities, but it's that again, that popular leavening that I particularly applaud.
Yes, in the old days they'd have been on horseback, of course, but there would have been the 3 estates, then the 4 estates, the nobility, the clergy, the shires and the burgesses of the Scottish times. The Company of Archers, there's 70 of them on parade today. Their history goes back 350 years to a time when archery was becoming redundant and pistols and shotguns were coming in, but they decided that they wanted to maintain the skills, so they formed this society, and they have their shoots every year at these links or on the meadows. They actually fire bows and arrows, this lot.
Do they?
Yes.
Has that not been banned these days?
Well,
not yet.
Not yet. It will be, no doubt, in time. But no, there are 400 of them, I believe, altogether.
How do you become a member of the Company of Archers,
Well,
or indeed any of the heralds or the pursuivants that we've seen today?
To be an archer, I mean, the qualifications, you've got to be of Scottish descent. You all have served in a Scottish regiment. And I think you have to have an interest in archery, and many of the people who are involved in the archers are sons of fathers who were in them before. I think, again, it's a bit of a kind of club. I think in the terms of the heraldry, well, you've got to have a knowledge, this is the thing. I mean, the Lord Lion King of Arms is a qualified lawyer, Robin Blair. He's a solicitor. The other people involved in it are people with heraldic knowledge. Alistair Campbell of Aird's, not Tony Blair's Alistair Campbell, but one from Argyll.
Wouldn't surprise me though if he popped up.
Well, indeed, he may well be in there. I think the funny thing about the Campbells is they all have a great physical similarity with each other. Alistair Campbell's the Albany Herald. No, he's the Unicorn Pursuivant. I always love that name.
And we can see some of the banners that Brian was talking about. Now, we can't really get a close look. Obviously, that's assault time, but they are supposed to be fairly transparent, because I think that the aim is to make it look like they're floating in the air.
My guess would be there, Jackie, having seen one of the words, that it's reflecting the words written on the mace of the Scottish Parliament, which are wisdom, justice, compassion and integrity. Yes. And if you think about it, when it comes to a Parliament, that'll do me. If they can live up to a section of that, that'll do fine. Those are inscribed upon the silver mace that we will see later when we come to the opening, the formal opening in the chamber. It's borne in, of course, as a symbol of not the Parliament's power, but the Parliament's presence, if you like, and it will be borne in at the same time as the crown.
And those 4 words, I was visiting the exhibition at the entrance to the Parliament, and they have a photograph of the mace, and you can just about read the inscription, and I was standing beside someone who was reading it out and misread it and got to passion? What's passionate?
All passion spent. There's quite a bit up there of that as well, but I
missed
think
the compassion.
They also, there's a nice little thing written on the mace right in the head. It says, "There shall be a Scottish Parliament," which of course sounds like a statement of the obvious, but is in fact clause 1 of the Scotland Act 1998, the one that Donald Dewar read out at a call at that news conference in Glasgow. There shall be a Scottish Parliament. I like that. And that's been picked up and written. It's also written on the base of his statue, the much visited statue in all senses in Glasgow.
In Glasgow, outside Buchanan Galleries. We had a spectacular aerial shot there, Roddy. Edinburgh, it's a magnificent city.
It's the city that I live in, and it's the city I love. I think we should be very proud of our capital. It's particularly today because it's looking so splendid.
There we are. The dais is the white covered erection down there, and obviously you can just see, disappearing out of the top of the shot, the statue of the Duke of Buccleuch, if I'm not mistaken.
The 6th Duke of Buccleuch, who was Lord President of the Council. If you want a historical thing, he is a descendant of Monmouth, Duke of Monmouth, and indeed Charles II.
These are called the flag setters, Jackie. They're sort of, if you like, heralding in the sense as well as the formal heralds, the beginning of the riding. They're taking their place there, and they will cast off, I think they describe it, in advance of the riding and then take it down. Oh, Jack's pulled a funny one for the Queen. Well done, that's good.
Is she laughing? Is she laughing?
Not greatly, no. It was a quick titter there, a quick regal titter, but...
Well, I think I think it was the Princess Royal was once quoted as saying, you know, if you go around laughing, no one will take you seriously.
Indeed, indeed. It's out of shot there, but it's definitely in the vicinity. Magnificent St Giles Cathedral, which is a marvellous, marvellous structure.
The High Kirk of Scotland that survived the Reformation. Church of John Knox, the great reformer, caused a lot of problems, did old John Knox.
Some form of church has stood on this site for 1,000 years. St Giles, he was a Greek hermit who settled in Provence in the 6th century. The story goes that he saved a hind that was being hunted by the king, who fired an arrow at the hind, which was cowering in St Giles' arms, and the arrow went through St Giles' hand. And that scene is depicted on a large engraving at the door, the entrance, just behind the statue of the Duke of Buccleuch there.
Alexander I was the king who raised the cathedral.
And as a result, St Giles is the patron saint of beggars, lepers, and as the hind was pregnant, nursing mothers.
Indeed.
Really seems to be enjoying it there.
They are enjoying it.
That was without a funny from Jack there.
Yes. Jack hasn't said, do you like my kilt?
Do you want my old one?
Better than the New York one, yeah.
There we are, the Highlands and Islands. The banner of the Highlands and Islands there.
Also, Jackie, in the riding there are school children taking part, including 8 who submitted postcard designs of the Scottish Parliament, symbolising the new, symbolising modernity, and those postcards are going to be used by the Parliament as their semi-official missives, if you like. But they're taking part as well, and along with, as I say, particularly, I like that idea. I think it was George Reed's idea. You see him there of the local heroes. In other words, this wasn't just for the great and the good, the Unca Gid, the self-appointed Unca Gid. It was for those who actually had to do some real work in their community, and the MSPs were enjoined to find people who were genuine community leaders in the real sense, not elected, not self-appointed, but those who just work on their own rights and their own merits to do good in their patch.
We were talking about St Giles earlier, and obviously the strong religious connection of Parliament Square West, and we can see some of Scotland's religious readers starting to join the procession.
It's a very well thought out mix, this procession, I think.
It certainly is. It certainly is. All walks of life. I think that was what they were trying to achieve, and I think they've gone a long way to doing that. Leslie Hines giving a royal wave just at the side of our camera shot there. Seeing some of her friends, no doubt, taking part in the riding.
I think it's the local authorities going past. You're seeing some of our comrades in arms.
We see there's a Lord Provost, there's a Provost and a Lord Provost from every local authority in Scotland. Of course, the day is not just for the politicians. As we've been saying, huge efforts have been made to ensure that the public play a role too. As part of that, each MP has been asked to nominate someone from their constituency who has done most for public good. Now, they're taking part in this riding all the way down the Royal Mile, and they're a procession of local heroes. Aileen Clark has been meeting some of them.
Shaheen Yunus is MSP Susan Deacon's local hero. She's one of Scotland's original Pecora pioneers. Based in Edinburgh for over 30 years, she's brought curry to the capital and well beyond. And how's this for a cultural mix of Karachi and Craigmillar? Surely a taste of modern Scotland.
Myself, to participate in such an historical moment meeting the Queen after that. And I think it's wonderful, and it's a wishful thinking, and it is a dream come true. I will cherish it for the rest of my life.
Kathleen Welsh is presiding officer George Reid's local hero. Since the 80s, she's been involved with running the Dyla Journey service based in Stirling, providing affordable transport with a helping hand. Kathleen's involved in a whole clutch of local charities and community groups too.
First thing that went through my head was, what am I going to wear? Another excuse to go out and buy something new this year. And that was as far as it went on that day, and then I automatically thought, cobbles, wheelchairs. Oh, and that gave me a kind of a fright. But I'm looking forward to it now, I really am looking forward to it now.
And you've got new tyres, new mountain biking tyres.
I haven't got a new outfit, but I bought tyres instead.
Robert Burns' anthem A Man's a Man, a highlight of the first opening ceremony. In Burns' house, we're reminded that MSPs could still learn much from the Bard, according to David Mundell's local hero, Shirley Bell. She's chief executive of the Burns World Federation.
Perhaps as they go through the door, they should see the words, O wad some poor the gift to gie us, to see ourselves as others see us. And when they're taking their seat in Parliament, they should also remember, then catch the moments as they fly and use them as ye ought, man.
Wise words from Burns, a much celebrated local hero, on the day our Parliament celebrates some of the nation's unsung heroes.
Rory, how important is it that today isn't just about civic dignitaries?
Fantastically important, because of course this is the Scottish Parliament, this is the Parliament of the people. Talk about civic dignitaries, there's Sean.
He is a bit of a civic dignitary,
yes.
isn't he? He's a national treasure.
A worldwide civic dignitary. He's probably the most famous Scotsman in the world. Edinburgh-born lad from Fountainbridge. Good guy.
Who was famously a milk boy.
And an artist model at the Edinburgh Art College. There's lots of painters from that era who've got portraits of him, not wearing very much, I might say.
I know. But if you believe everyone who now says they had their milk delivered by Sean Connery, he must have been a busy boy. About 118,000 homes he must have gone to.
Well, indeed, but they're a family that still have a presence in Edinburgh. His brother lives in Corstorphine, and actually is almost his double.
He is almost his double.
Quite spooky sometimes.
A double 007.
Yes, indeed. But no, I think there's a great mix in this, and that's the way it should be, because this is the Scotland of the 21st century, and this is our country.
Do you think the youngsters there have any idea what they're taking part in, the historical sense of
Well, I think in years to come they'll remember, because, you know, I remember going to watch various processions when I was a kid. I remember being in Princess Street watching the Queen drive by, 1977. I remember events back in the 60s. This is the great thing about our city of Edinburgh. It's a great theatre for these events.
Theatre indeed. I think that's some more members of the Scottish Youth Theatre, or some members of the public who need some advice on
Certainly not an MSP, I don't think.
There we go.
Very tall.
I think they're members of the Tapuka Stilt
Tall
walkers.
laddies, yes.
Well, Glenn's still up there at the City Chambers. Glenn, it's a huge procession. Is everyone on the move yet?
I think they're certainly getting into the mood. The sun has just come out at this end of the Royal Mile. There are lots of smiles and lots of waving here as the procession weaves its way past, down the Royal Mile, past the dais where the Queen and the other dignitaries are watching things go past. There's a performance by a group of young people there with the flags of many of the countries of the world and their T-shirts, entertaining the huge crowds from across Scotland that have gathered here to watch the procession as it goes past. There's music from bands from across the country as well, and as you pointed out, behind the Mid-Scotland and Fife banner a short while ago, many of the celebrity guests, including Sir Sean Connery, and including some more localised personalities. I got a wee wave from the BBC's Fred Macaulay as he made his way down the Royal Mile. MSPs and their local heroes obviously taking part today, and for many of them a chance to bring along their children. I saw the Transport Minister, Nicol Stephen, clutching children, holding the hands of his youngsters, and in years to come, obviously, it'll be a day that they will be able to remember and tell their children about too. The procession continuing now, weaving its way down the Royal Mile towards Holyrood, where Aileen Clark, my colleague, is watching. What's happening with you, Aileen?
Well, Glenn, we're just waiting for the procession to come down that riding to appear just behind me here. Lots of people have been waiting at the barriers here since quite early this morning. From just about 9 o'clock, people were lining up to get their places here. Plenty of Scots in the audience. There's ladies here from the Borders who've got the biggest bag of wine gums, frankly, I've ever seen. But amongst the crowd too, we've also got a more international flavour amongst visitors, and also people from elsewhere who are living and working here, either as students or working here in the early part of their careers. Now, I've got some of those folk here to find out what today means for them. So, Lynn, you're here from France, you're a teaching assistant. What are you most looking forward to today?
Well, just seeing Sean Connery and hopefully seeing whether he has a kilt on or not.
That would clearly make your day, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Jing, you're working here as a student. You're from northeast China. What do you think of the Parliament building?
Well, it's quite interesting and attractive. Actually, I just live down there, so I pass here every day, so I see it grows. Yes?
And you quite like the way it's sort of fitting into this, because it's quite modern and new in this part of Edinburgh.
Yes, I think so. You see that building is quite old, but here is quite different.
Now, Pedro, all the way from Venezuela, working in Edinburgh for the moment, what are you making of today? Are you soaking up the atmosphere?
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to see is the pride that people feel about, the new parliament as a symbol of, the revolution and their ownership about their, taking in their own hands all their matters as a country in this case.
So do you think today might help make the Scots feel a bit better about having a parliament and maybe even a bit more excited about politics?
I hope so. I actually hope so. I think, apathy in any case, it's not good. I think it's wrong. And I think I was saying, your friend just now that I think, for example, apathy maybe is one of the things that make this be so over budget, because people were not caring about, the building, what was happening with the building. So yes, I think they should be proud, and I think this is a beautiful example of, globalization. They have a Spanish architect for it's completely different landscape, completely different sort of building and architecture, and, I think it's great.
Well, I'll let you get back down there to wait, like the rest of us, for the riding to come down here. We're all waiting on this procession with all its colour and music, and there's a lot of people who've been waiting here, as I say, for some time to really get the feeling and the atmosphere down to this end of the Royal Mile on what's a very special day. Back to you.
Thank you, Aileen. Some very eloquent views there from some visitors to Edinburgh. Makes you ashamed of your linguistic abilities, doesn't it, Ron?
Well, Scotland always used to be a very European country, in that we had all our trade routes to North Germany and France, and I think we're still a multicultural city, Edinburgh. It's a great city.
It still does lure in the tourists. I suspect there's a huge percentage of tourists lining those streets we can see just now.
All over the world, Edinburgh is a destination. If you go to America, you go to Australia, you go to France, they all talk about your beautiful city or your beautiful city. It's a classy city, and good for it. We need that in Scotland. We need to be proud of ourselves. We need to get rid of our hang-ups and our.
Indeed. Just making its way down the Royal Mile there. A bit different from the ancient riding ceremonies, where I understand that there was an edict from the council for the people of Edinburgh during the ridings of hundreds of years ago to keep the streets clean and don't throw squibs.
Well, indeed, or anything else for that matter. And of course, Gardy Lou.
They don't look like a squib-throwing audience to me.
Well, there were 4 horses there at least. In the old times, they would have come largely on horseback with processions behind, and the honours of Scotland would be carried up the High Street.
Yes, the honours of Scotland will be seeing a much closer look, I hope, of the crown later. I think it brings up almost the rear of the procession.
Yes, it's just the crown they're bringing.
It is just the crown.
Yes.
This was billed as
symbolism.
a day of quiet Scottish dignity. That's what George Reid was hoping for.
Yes, but nonetheless, I think it's very important that we make a show. This is our pride. One of the foreign visitors talked about our pride. We must show our pride in our country. And this is fundamental to the pride in our country if we want to make it work.
Indeed, a proud Lord Provost there, waving to chums Leslie Hines. Only the second female Lord Provost in Edinburgh's history.
Yes, and Lord Lieutenant of Midlothian. She's our first citizen, and she's done a pretty good job. We've had a succession of rather good Lord Provosts, I think, in Edinburgh in the last 10 years, and it's a good ongoing tradition.
She says that today is not only a boost for Scotland, but a boost for Edinburgh.
Well, of course it is.
Of course it is, isn't it?
And Edinburgh is the capital of Scotland. And OK, much as we all love Glasgow, much as we love Aberdeen, much as we love Inverness, this is our capital city, and this is our capital city at its best.
Lovely view there.
Queen Victoria would never travel up and down the High Street because it was in such a terrible state during her reign. She used to take alternative routes when she went to Holyrood. In fact, she didn't really like going to Holyrood at all. Thankfully, her descendants, when they came along, took another course of action. There's nothing like having a royal along to get a clean-up.
Indeed. A pristine, pristine Holyrood that we're looking at the moment. And our political editor, Brian Taylor, is now in the debating chamber here at Holyrood. He's waiting to take us through the formal proceedings of this opening ceremony. That's not happening for a little while now. I think, Brian, are you there?
I'm here indeed, Jackie, yes.
Can you give us a flavour of what we can expect? Bit of rehearsing going on, I think.
Yes, what they're doing is that you can see there in the public gallery, the members of the public, those who are lucky enough to be inside, are taking their seats and being entertained by the young choir there who've been singing a selection of Burns songs, dear to my heart, I must say, because I love the songs of Burns, and even the audience all enjoying it, but of course they're waiting for the main event as well. I think the several strands to the opening ceremony, of course, the bearing in of the crown, the bearing in of the mace. There you can see Charles Kennedy in the gallery. There you can see the crown itself being ready for its role.
Yes, the crown now arriving. It's just leaving Parliament Hall. As I said, it's bringing up the rear. It's a pretty long procession. So
the crown that was used to crown Mary Queen of Scots. And Robert the Bruce. Great tradition there. Mined from Crawford Moor.
And as it makes its way down the Royal Mile, I think it's going to be passing John Knox house, which was the home. I didn't think John Knox ever lived there.
No, there's always a debate about that. He was a cantankerous old so-and-so, Haddington born. My family come from Haddington, I understand these things.
We're looking now, Winnie Ewing looking excited. Well might she be. Sitting next to Michael Martin, obviously the Speaker of the House of Commons. Well, the Celtic family there, very well represented today. A little while ago, James Cook caught up with Dr. Rory O'Hanlon, Speaker of the Irish Parliament, and the presiding officer of the Welsh Assembly, David Ellis-Thomas.
Well, of course, the past 7 years have been a period of momentous change, not just for Scotland, but for Wales as well. We're joined now by the Speaker of the Welsh Assembly, Lord Ellis-Thomas, and also by the Speaker of the Irish Parliament, the Dáil, Rory O'Hanlon. First of all, Lord Ellis-Thomas, this is a significant day, not just for Scotland, but for the whole of the United Kingdom, isn't it?
I think Scotland is showing how you can make ceremonial also a popular event. Obviously, there are the royal formal things that have to be done in terms of the Parliament, the building being open. But as far as I can see it, the whole of the people of Scotland are joining in one way or another, or at least their representatives here today. And that hopefully will make the Parliament, and perhaps all our Parliaments, a bit more popular.
Rory O'Hanlon, it's a very different Parliament from the Dáil, isn't it?
Well, yes, it's different in that the Dáil is a very old historic building, 250 years old. I had an opportunity to visit your Parliament earlier this year, and I have to say I was very, very impressed with the building. I believe it will be a very functional building, and that members will be able to do their job in a very, very sufficient way.
And what of the day's ceremonies?
Oh, I'm delighted to be here for today's ceremony. Very, very historic occasion, a great occasion for Scotland. Sometimes I think we take democracy for granted. It's only when you see tyrannies on your television that you realise how great it is to live in a democracy, and I think it's a great day to be here.
And Lord Ellis-Thomas, put this day in some sort of context in terms of where we go from here with nationalism.
Well, I hope that this great parliamentary building will be an international symbol of the nation of Scotland and of devolved nations in the UK. Now, clearly, I would like to see a bit of political development. I'd like to see the SNP in government, but maybe that's for another day.
Yes, I think it possibly is. Both you gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Well, the Speaker is now happily settled in the chamber. Brian, tell us some more about the guests today.
Jackie, thanks for that. I just saw a few moments ago, actually, Henry McLeish arriving in the gallery. I'm not sure whether we're able to pick him up or not. He's sitting very close to Sir David Steele. Now, those are two men that played a large part in the preparations. There he is. There's Henry McLeish, indeed, sitting next to Anne Maguire, who's the Minister of State at the Scotland office in London. Henry McLeish looking rather wistful there. Of course, he was the second First Minister. He followed Donald Dewar. It was, to say the least, a troubled period, and he was obliged to step down at the close. But I wonder if just in longer terms people will think of Mr McLeish's contribution not so much to the governance of Scotland but perhaps to the idea of an ambition for Scotland, because he certainly stressed that point when he was in office as First Minister. And if anything today is about Scotland staking its ambition. Indeed, I expect the present First Minister, Jack McConnell, to make reference to that. Just at the top of your picture there, you can see Sir David Steele behind and to the left of Winnie Ewing. Yes, let's move back a bit, sitting next to Charles Kennedy. Now, Sir David, of course, was the first presiding officer. He knows more than most about the trials and tribulations of the building of this new Parliament, sitting next to his wife, Lady Judy. Behind him and to the right, just moving out of shot, is Robert Gordon, who played a large part as a civil servant in the building.
Pop outside this building again. The riding should just be approaching the foot of the Royal Mile, and Aileen Clark is outside Holyrood Palace. Aileen, are the crowds enjoying the spectacle?
They're thoroughly enjoying it. The riding, as you can probably see, has just made it down to us here. So people are watching everybody go by. There's central Scotland going by now as we see. And I've dragged this man here away from taking photos in order to get a wee bit of a flavour of just what you're enjoying today. You've come here from Fintry, Sandy. How are you enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it very much. I'm enjoying a very pleasant atmosphere. Although the one thing that's really striking me is there seems to be a lack of noise from everybody watching on. Everybody's seeming to be watching very quietly and not apparently enjoying themselves by whooping it up and cheering and all that. That's taken me by surprise, I must admit.
So you'd like a wee bit more cheering?
A wee bit more involvement from the folk that are watching.
It's been quite a spectacle though, hasn't it, with the riding coming down the Royal Mile and the sun being out. It has been quite a memorable morning.
Yes, it has. It's excellent, and there were some lovely events earlier on. The Young Drama Group up at the Parliament Square, which was really fantastic, and a lot of things laid on for folk watching, so I've really enjoyed it today.
And there's quite a mixture of people in the crowd, isn't there, Sandy? I mean, you've got your visitors, your tourists who have come along to see it, but also a lot of people who have popped into Edinburgh from maybe Musselburgh, Kirk Newton, or who have come to watch people in the riding.
And some Norway supporters as well, who are going to be disappointed later on, but there's very cosmopolitan crowd. Although I've got to say that I'm intending to go up to the alternative opening as well, up in Carlton Hill at 2 o'clock. So, but
You're keeping your options open today?
I'm keeping my options open, yeah.
But not about the score this afternoon, clearly?
No, not at all. But I've got to say, I think the Parliament building is absolutely fantastic. From the outside, I've not been inside yet, but I think from the outside, it really is a wonderful building, and we should be proud of it.
Well, I better let you get back to taking some photos before you lose all the best of the opportunities.
Okay.
Because here we are, the riding, as I say, coming down the Royal Mile. Now we can see more of them coming down. We've had the first part of it here already. More banners, more colour, lots of waves from those on the procession to the crowd standing at the side. Sandy there saying he'd like to hear a bit more cheering. It's all quite respectful at the moment, quite muted. But it is a fantastic spectacle when you stand here and look right up the Royal Mile. And all you can see, right as far as the eye can see at the moment up the Royal Mile, of course, is lots of banners, lots of people, lots of colour. And folk down the barriers, of course, on that side,
watching what's happening, looking out maybe for people in that riding that they know, looking out for the Sean Connery, of course, who would be coming down there to give him a bit of a wave. I'm sure there's quite a lot of ladies, certainly, that I've spoken to today that were hoping very, very hard for a wave from Sir Sean. They were almost as excited about Sir Sean as they were about seeing the Queen today, some of the ladies who have come down here to watch the procession. There we go, lots more waving there from some of the younger members of the riding. Clearly, of course, this riding was always supposed to represent the young and the old of Scotland, which, as you can see from that, it's doing very well indeed. Pomp, of course, behind it from that band, just having a bit of a break there. Just having a bit of a moment to themselves. They must have taken quite a lot of puff, you know, all the way down there. So there they go, a bit of a break as they round the corner here. And then, of course, enter the Highlands and Islands. That's their banner there. So it's all happening down at this bit. We're going to enjoy the rest of the riding as it goes by with all that pomp of that brass band in front of us. That's what's happening here down at the bottom of the Royal Mile. What's happening up there with you, Glenn?
Well, it's gone a wee bit quieter. The procession, the tail end of it, has now passed from this end of the Royal Mile, with the crown of Scotland being carried at the tail end of the procession. The crowds are starting to disperse from here, but the Royal Mile, as you can see, remains lined with soldiers from the Royal Scots, the oldest regiment in the British Army. The police still here too, and the saltires still fluttering in the light breeze. But the procession making its way now down the Royal Mile, past the dais, of course, where the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh have been watching. In fact, I think a few moments ago, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh stepped down from the dais to take a short break from the proceedings. They won't actually join the end of the procession themselves. Instead, they will have a short period of rest when they'll be taken into the City of Edinburgh headquarters, the City Chambers, and they'll have the chance there to take a breather, maybe have a wee cup of tea in the Lord Provost's office. There's also a civic reception taking place in the Chambers today, with the spouses of international guests being entertained there by the Lord Provost this afternoon. Of course, the procession making its way now down to Holyrood, and the focus moving on to the building itself, the creation of the architect Enrique Morales, and of course his widow Benedetta Tagliabue here for the ceremonies today. Earlier I spent some time with her on a tour of the Parliament building, a special guided tour, and this is how it went. When you look at the front of this building, virtually completed, what do you think?
I think that I love it, and I'm really very, 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 very happy.
Did you think it would get to this stage? There must have been times.
I don't know. I really always worked very, very, very hard because this would be a reality. And now that it is a reality, my heart is really full of happiness.
We're looking at the front of the building opposite Holyrood Palace. The public entrance is on the ground floor with the debating chamber above. Now the chamber, everybody's agreed, is one of the most striking parts of the building. Some people have compared it with the Forth Bridge. Is there any truth in that?
Well, the Forth Bridge was a mythical example, engineer construction to us. My mother gave us as a wedding present in '93 a crystal ball with the Forth Bridge, and this was really a very important object for Eric. He was always keeping it in his bedroom, very near him. And we had a book, a fantastic book on the construction of the Forth Bridge. But it's not only that, you know. We try to have all the tradition of construction of Scotland in our mind.
Including boat building, which famously influenced many of the shapes and forms inside Holyrood. Not least this glass and steel canopy, which creates a lobby at the centre of the Parliament complex.
This is really the heart of the Parliament, but what is surprising is that this part of the building arrived later, you know, it arrived out of the difficulty.
So actually, the area that we're stepping into wasn't supposed to be here. It's almost an accident of invention.
This was supposed to be part of the garden, and I think it is still really like an open-air place. You have the light coming from inside, and you have these openings that permits you to look outside, see the rest of the building, and have this feeling of being outside but protected.
It's her first visit since MSP's moved in.
I'm really overwhelmed when I come here and I see that everything was done in a fantastic way and with fantastic quality.
And do you think overall that the building we now have here lives up to Enrique's original vision?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, the design was there, and the office, myself and all the staff in Barcelona, and also the people of Ramjam, we went on working in the same way as we were doing when Enrique was alive.
And the Morales design's a complicated one with some unusual motifs repeated throughout. There are the shapes on the outside of the building which some people have unkindly referred to as hair dryers. What are they?
These in a way are kind of secrets, you know. In a way it's very beautiful to have secrets, and then the people can put their imagination, as you say hair dryers or I don't know what. So these panels made of stone are kind of shading the building and really also shading the shape of the windows. So in a way, if you look at it, they are like curtains.
And what could be more normal than that? One of Holyrood's many mysteries solved.
Well, maybe we'll get to the bottom of some more of those mysteries a bit later in the programme. The thoughts there of the wife of Enrique Morales, Benedetta Tagliabue. Well, still a few minutes to go until the Queen arrives here at Holyrood. She'll be greeted in the garden lobby. Now, that's where we were earlier. We've had to move, but it gives us a bit of a chance to have another look at a part of the building. Now, these are the MSP's offices, and these, where I am now, this is it, the famous Think Pod, or contemplation space. Now, I'm not alone in this contemplation space. I hope you've been putting your Think Pod to good use. Joining me now is the world-renowned architectural writer and designer, Charles James. Charles, great to have you along here, and your much-needed expertise. Now, you've had a chance to have a good tour of the building. What's your overall view?
I think this is the most significant Parliament building for 50 years, there's no question, since Le Corbusier's Champ de Garde. It's better than all of them, I'll say that unequivocally.
So you like it?
It's magnificent. It's a winner, no question.
Because the team initially toured a lot of the world's parliaments. Do you see bits and pieces in here?
Well, it's made so many innovations. It welcomes people in, it's full of optimism. It uses metaphor. You heard Benedetta talking about its secrets, you know. Those hair dryers, as some people call them,
Indeed.
are a lot of other things. And one of the great secrets of this building is it has so much for everybody. It welcomes nature in, it's part of the city. It uses the symbolism of boats, and these boats are petals, part of nature, and fishes. In fact, you can see the garden foyer as whales. You're in a fish. Now, which of those is the right secret? It's all of it.
What about the exteriors? What about the view from above?
The view from above is really the iconic view. I think will be like the Sydney Opera House in the view in people's mind, and the way it extends out, as you can see, into the Salisbury Crag, into nature. That's very important, and it's a place for people to congregate. Actually, in that way, it's quite unique as far as parliaments go.
And because Morales said that he wanted a building in the land, not on it.
Absolutely. It nestles into the city, it nestles into the land, and extends this wonderful arm, which is a place that people can politically demonstrate. Now, you'll never find that in London, nor in Washington, D.C. There's no place for the people. This is something that's Scots and unique to this city.
And what a view from the crags there. Yeah. Morales promised more than just a building, a work of art. I think I know the answer to that question. Did he achieve it?
He achieved many kinds of works of art. It's too many to get in one sitting. You have to come back again and again and again. It's like a 14-course meal, and I think people will take time to absorb it. And it's really something that should be absorbed in time and not in a single glance. Unlike the other great iconic buildings, which you get as a one-liner, This one really is a time building. It's like a city in itself, a small city, a tiny city. And you'll never understand it until you've been 3 or 4 times. And that's good, that's a good thing. Like democracy itself, full of ideas, full of conflicts, full of intensities, and humor. The humor, you'll begin to understand
Tell us about the humor then, go on. What aspects of humor have you noticed?
Those fish, those boats, those pedals, if you look closely, they're upside down. The hammer beam roof, which you found in the old Parliament, is used here in a very witty way. As part of those scalloped fish shape. And in the general debating chamber, you find it transformed once again. So there's a hammer beam roof of the 21st century.
Joined together by steel notes from the oil industry again, the old and the new, the design and the materials, old and new.
Yes, exactly. Look at those oak. Look at that oak. It's so beautifully crafted. All of that's an art. I mean, it takes so much time. And look at all of those cameras and lighting instruments. To turn lighting into an art is an incredible thing. That's arts and crafts. That's the old British tradition. There's Macintosh in it. In fact, as we see
That's that mix of old and new, as you were saying. Queensberry House, an original building built into the site.
Built into the site, and the irony is that, of course, it's where the MSPs now enter. It's one of their main entrances. And the Duke of Queensberry was one of the people to close down in 1707 the Parliament. So he's having to eat his words with Donald Duer's library right there in the
We're really
midst.
rubbing that in. Poor old Duke of Queensberry. Myths, those myths that we heard from Benedetta earlier, the myths have grown up around the design. To you overall, is it a branch of tree? Is it a monastery? What is it?
It is, I think, it's a mixture of a monastery and a college and a fragmented city. And I should say, if you took Salisbury Crags, or Arthur's Seat, and broke it up and made it into a piece of architecture, it's a rock. And if you think how Scottish destiny is in their landscape, this building, I think, is great because it's a new kind of form of identity for the Scots. It really goes back to the rocks, back to those locks, back to those fragments.
Right out of the land, as he said. But we're going to talk an awful lot more about the building later. But of course, the Parliament, well, it's a place of many words, but not all of them are going to be spoken by MSPs in the debating chamber, because embedded in the very walls of the Parliament are the words of the people of Scotland. It's the result of a competition to choose the words that they found the most appropriate. Here's Ken MacDonald.
Say but little and say it well. Oh, if only. These blast walls are part of the bomb-proofing that's helped add so many millions to the builder's bill. But the writings on the walls say far more about traditional Scottish ways of thinking than modern fears of enemy weapons, real or sexed up. Chosen from a list of suggestions from people across Scotland and laid out in Scots, Gaelic and English, these are words intended to uplift and inspire those who work here. Everyone from the Jannies to, who knows, maybe even a First Minister or two.
Words are significant in such a building. Poetry is especially is the art which Scots do extremely well, superlatively well. And so these little touches of, if you like, antiquity carved in stone do give a dimension of the longevity of the Scottish nation.
And our love of words is extending to the opening ceremony. Although he's not able to be here himself, Edwin Morgan, our Macker or Poet Laureate of Scotland, has written a poem commemorating the day and inspired by the building.
I liked the idea that it was meant to be a building that met the kind of the city itself and also even the landscape going out, like, I think he used the phrase himself, like the petals of a flower going out into the earth of the city, underneath the city, as it were. So it's a building of many surprises, and I like that idea. It's not a building you take in right away. That's perhaps too easy. It makes you think and wonder about what's going on in this building. It's a building of many curves and many surprising nooks and crannies, and I like that.
Perhaps those who chose the writing on the wall allowed themselves a wry wee smile when selecting these words. Sweet ghosts, the builders are not gone.
Ken MacDonald there, and the Parliament speaking for itself. And there we have the honours of Scotland, with the crown, part of the honours of Scotland. The oldest sovereign regalia in the British Isles. The Crown of Scotland was made in its present form for James V, refashioned though back in 1540 from a damaged and lighter crown by an Edinburgh goldsmith. It passed his house on the way down John Mossman and used to crown a 9-month-old Mary, Queen of Scots. Hopefully we can get a slight, there we go, the Duke of Hamilton signed it out this morning and promised to keep it safe. At the base is made from Scottish gold, encrusted with 22 gemstones and 20 precious stones. There are also some freshwater pearls in there from Scotland's rivers. And in case you're wondering if it's a bit of a task to hold it, it only weighs 3 pounds 10 ounces. Isn't it a beauty? Now, Charles, because of Enrique Morales' untimely death, a certain amount of guesswork had to be done on the Parliament building. How difficult would that have been to interpret his aims?
I think that's very hard to build a dead architect's work. And in this case, there was a collaboration between a local firm, RMJM, and the Barcelona firm. And it's worked both to their advantage, because this is easily Enrique Morales' best building. It's really well detailed, well crafted, and that comes from the local architect. So it's hard to do, but in this case, and in most cases it doesn't work out, in this case it's worked out to the advantage. I think it's better than other Morales' buildings, and I give credit to the local architects, Rimjim.
Well, we were there just making our way down the Royal Mall, and that is the route that you'll take if you're heading to the Scottish Parliament. Now, one criticism of it is that you don't make your way down to it and see it in front of you, a great striking icon. You sort of stumble into it. Now, is that a criticism? Does that have a basis?
Well, you know, he won the competition finally against 5 or 6 other architects who produced monumental buildings, classical buildings on a plinth, the more normal way to design a parliament. And his was a conscious decision to break it up, to fragment it, to not be pompous. And that's something that Donald Dewar particularly liked and the jury liked. And they said, we don't want to go the old road. This is a new kind of parliament. I think it's new because not only the way it welcomes in the people and has these participatory spaces, but also because the way it actually uses the media. The media is an essential, it's the new fourth estate. You know, they talked about the fourth estate historically as being important in democracy, and it's the role of the media in mediating what the politicians are up to. And here in this building, there's more media. In fact, the media has taken over the garden lobby and made its own. It's stolen that space.
It certainly has today. We saw there fleetingly, and I don't know if we can get that shot back again, a little bit of the landscaping. Yeah. We saw a little girl, I think, on a parent's shoulders there. Now, the landscaping is spectacular here, isn't it? And obviously, the use of water, the use of the lawns.
I think the water, those little pools they're tiny, but you know what they remind one of? There's the fact that in Scotland it's either rainy or sunny, and it's forming little ponds. And everybody has a pond in their backyard. So that's, again, a reference to the Scottish reality. And to go back to your previous question, you know, it's not a pompous building because it has so many of those local references. Boats, what could be more Scottish than have boats? Turned upside down as they are, I mean, there's the humor again.
Turned upside down, and again, that's a joke as far as you're
That's a joke, and you know...
There we can see the landscaping there in its fine form.
You see how it comes out in these long green turfed lines. Now that green is going to turn into wild planting that is local to the area. It's going to be a mixture of ecologies. And so it's going to become a wild landscape rather than a manicured turf. It's going to look quite different. And that's going to relate it to Salisbury Crag across the way.
And I don't know if this is yet another myth, but the story goes that when Enrique Morales was selling the idea, when he was selling the concept, he brought a branch in and said, right, this is the branch falling from the crags, lying on the land, and the trees and the leaf shapes emanating from it.
Absolutely right. I mean, you can see the leaves here in stainless steel, and the twigs are the green bits. And those two images, of course, the stainless steel, which glistens, is going to be that iconic image. If you can get right over the building and look down, the fifth facade as it's called, and which people are now in airplanes and helicopters a lot, this facade is going to stay in people's mind because it's repeated so often in the building. It's that long, slivery silverfish.
Well, you know, there are lots of people at home scratching their heads saying, I don't see any fish. Believe us, by the end of the program, you will. Outside this building, though, the riding should be nearing its end just about. Let's go over now to Holyrood's public foyer. James Cook is there. James, what's happening?
Well, what's happening is it's very much filling up here. It's, as you can see behind me, pretty packed, and among the guests arriving here, I have with me Alexander McCall-Smith, the author, and Gavin Hastings, the rugby legend, of course. Sandy, first of all, to you, neither of you have seen this building before. What do you make of it so far? I mean, you're only just in.
Well, even the entrance is impressive. It's a wonderful thing to see it revealed in this way. I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of it.
And what's going to happen for you today? How are you going to make your way through? What is the plan? Do you know, or is it just all up in the air?
I absolutely no idea, but it's been very efficiently run. There are lots of people with badges, and I'm sure they'll be able to tell us what to do.
Gavin, do you have any idea what's going on?
None whatsoever. I think the Queen's opening the building, isn't she? But no, it's been great, and marching down the Royal Mile, and just thousands and thousands of people out there, and we were just in behind Sean Connery, and everyone, Sean, 2 bottles of milk, please, and it was absolutely priceless. And we've had great comments all the way down the Royal Mile. It's been fantastic so far.
Gavin, what do you think this Parliament can do for sport in this country without being too political?
Well, you know, I was with one of the Paralympians, Aileen. She was a cyclist. She won a gold medal. She set a new world record, and it was just fantastic seeing the gold medal. And, you know, I really hope that, like a sport like cycling, we need a velodrome up here in Scotland, and we've got Chris Hoy, new world records and gold medalist, and Aileen. It's fantastic, and I just think that now that the building is finished and completed, time to move on, and let's go forward with positive messages.
Sandy, just briefly, if you would, just a quick word about the arts, as that's your field, as it were.
Yes, well, I'm sure that having a Parliament with this fine building, which is a demonstration of interest in the arts, will continue the tradition of interest in it.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. I'll let you go in and see the building and see what it's like, and we can go inside the chamber now and hear from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
James, thanks very much indeed. Great to hear there from Sandy McCall-Smith and Gavin Hastings giving their very distinctive views upon the event, and that was a gorgeous gag about Sean Connery. Inside the chamber here, as you can probably see, though, there's Sir David Steele and Charles Kennedy still waiting patiently, but down on the floor we've had the MSPs beginning to arrive, in fact beginning to fill up the chamber, the members of the Parliament themselves being watched intently from the gallery. The entertainment that's been taking place is the Royal Scottish National Orchestra been playing away, and of course they're going to play during the ceremony itself, which kicks off in what, about 25 minutes time, something like that, just before that perhaps, round about that time anyway. And you can see there the public galleries as they peer over at the members, and there's the RSNO down below getting themselves into action for the big day. I think the ceremony itself I think should be a good combination of course there must be a formal element, of course there must be formality. It is the opening of Scotland's new Parliament building, a building that's scheduled to last not just for a few weeks or a few weekends, but for centuries. But equally, there's a good sense about it as well. You know, you can see the people are having a bit of a laugh on the chamber floor, and even from the gallery there as they watch. And here's the Queen leaving the city chambers, where she's been taking a short break as the riding went down the Royal Mile. She takes her place alongside the Duke, heading down towards Holyrood.
Well, as you can see, the royal party leaving the city chambers after a short break. Let's go back to the top of the hill and Glenn.
It's gone very, very quiet at this end of the Royal Mile as all the action moves down, and the soldiers, though, remaining in place as the Queen leaves after her short break and makes her way from the Edinburgh City Chambers out onto the Royal Mile once again to make her journey, her riding down the mile to the new Holyrood Parliament building to conduct the formal opening ceremony. Still a good crowd on the streets catching a glimpse of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. You can hear some people applauding and a few flags being waved too as the royal car heads down in the direction of the new Parliament building. Big crowds here today. Many people have now started to break away, at least at this end of the Royal Mile, no doubt to catch the formal proceedings in the Parliament chamber on the television. And of course another big flag-waving event taking place across the country in Glasgow this afternoon. The Scotland match with Norway at Hampden. No, one or two MSPs and certainly the Norwegian diplomats keen to get away at the end of the ceremony to catch that event. With a bit of luck, the Queen herself might even tune in for that one. A lot of business still to go between now and then, and within a few minutes the Queen arriving at Holyrood to play her part in the formal opening of this new building. She'll of course be addressing the MSPs and the other invited guests there. Right now, slowly making her way down the Royal Mile.
Brian, the Queen doesn't
George
actually...
Reid, of course.
Of course, Brian, the Queen doesn't actually enter the debating chamber of the House of Commons.
The Houses of Parliament, Jackie, you're quite right. She goes to the House of Lords, and the members of the lower house, the members of the Commons, are summoned and stand, I have to feel, slightly awkwardly at the bar of the House of Lords. But if you like, this is very much a Scottish occasion. She's the Queen of Scots, as was being pointed out earlier by Roddy Martin, and she will be entering the chamber here as she has done before. She entered in July the 1st, 1999 to give the Parliament its full powers, to grant full powers to the new devolved Parliament. She spoke in Aberdeen, I remember, on the occasion when Parliament went there. What a remarkable speech, Jackie, when she, I think almost, I mean, sovereigns don't do apologies, but she almost apologised for remarks some 25 years previously when she had appeared to suggest that she was anxious about the then proposals for devolution and about the unity of her kingdom. In Aberdeen, she said that she believed devolution had strengthened the United Kingdom and strengthened her monarchy, presumably as a consequence. But you know, what she's doing here really in going into the chamber itself is not what happens in the Commons, but it's what used to happen in the old pre-1707 Scottish Parliament. And monarchs, as I said earlier, very much took part in proceedings, certainly in opening them, and in the cases of some of them, you couldn't get them to shut up. They wanted to take part in the debates and lead them themselves. Good response from the crowd there, but I think it's the saltire on display today rather than the Union flag, but that's perhaps a reflection of the fact that this is the opening of Scotland's Parliament. Inside the chamber, I just see the MSPs, of course, waiting eagerly for the events we're able to see that they're not able to see, of the arrival of the Queen coming down the Royal Mile. That figure there in the middle, you know who that is? That's Paul Grice. He's the Chief Executive and Clerk of the Parliament, who took a lot of stick over this building, but he looks pretty pleased today on this opening day for Holyrood.
He was certainly a very relieved man last night, Brian, as I was speaking to him. He was out overseeing the laying of the lawns last night, and he was happy that everything was falling into place just in time. Here we have the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. They can't be far from the new Scottish Parliament there. They must be around the area of the Canongate Kirk there. I don't know if we can see it. Many that just coming up to the Canongate Kirk. Many famous people buried there. A real sense of, again, that history of Edinburgh. Among them, Mrs. Agnes Macklehose, Robert Burns' famous muse, Clorinda. She's buried in this churchyard, as well as the founder of Fettes College, Sir William Fettes, various Lord Provosts, and of course a certain economist called Adam Smith. The shops just where we are now include, there's a whisky shop which today, obviously with an eye for a marketing opportunity, offering special bottles labelled to mark the day, but these are single cask whiskies in case you're going to pick up a bottle or two. No water has been added, so be on your guard. There's also the Edinburgh Fudge Shop is offering special Parliament fudge to commemorate the day. Not an opportunity missed. Again, most of the crowds have moved down to the base of the Royal Mile, to this marvellous part of the city, which had seen better days until the building of the new Parliament. It's had a bit of a facelift, and Leslie Hines was saying that certainly siting the Parliament there has done this area of the city a pretty good deed, sweeping up as it does to the crags and to Arthur's Seat. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh will enter the Parliament through the Canongate entrance, near to that Canongate wall. A security blast wall that we put to good use, as we saw earlier. On it, those pieces of art, including stones and rock from around the country. There's also a sketch there of the Edinburgh landscape, based on a doodle by Enric Morales he did from a window of the Balmoral Hotel. And Benedetta has the original on the headed notepaper. And as we all know, the Duke of Edinburgh has a reputation for being forthright in his views. I wonder what he thinks of the Parliament. I wonder what the conversation was like in the car coming down. Now, Philip. Now, Philip. Of course, who perhaps we also need today is Prince Charles, a man with a well-known and keen interest in architecture. Charles Jenks, you're the expert. Do you think Prince Charles would approve of the new Parliament building?
Well, he didn't approve of the Museum of Scotland, the new museum. I'm not sure. I think he'd love the craftsmanship here and all the natural metaphors. So I think in that sense, he would really admire the building.
And there we have the Queen getting her first view of the new Parliament building. She's moving into the garden lobby. Introduced, of course, to Jack McConnell, who she met earlier, Joan Wallace, Deputy First Minister, leader of the Scottish Lib Dems, Nicola Sturgeon, leader of the SNP and the Parliament, David McCletchy, Scots Conservatives, and Robin Harper, parliamentary leader of the Green Party. The garden lobby links the debating chamber to the MSP's offices. Some say this is where all the political wheeling and dealing will go on. I couldn't possibly comment. Yeah, let's have a look around this place. Most of the materials are Scottish. I'm sure that's what George Reid is pointing out, including the signature sparkly granite on the floor. And there we have these amazing upturned boats, or fishes, Charles, as you were saying. Are these the fishes?
And petals. Remember, it's a secret that you have to decode. You have to work at it.
I see.
You have to project onto it what you think it might be, and then it gives you something back.
Some say they're leaves.
One of the great things about this is the contrast between the openness, the light coming in from everywhere, and the darkness of these caves. We're in a cave-like space, a monastic-like space. So he uses concrete in these vaults, and then he opens it out and brings in light from everywhere, which at first is slightly disorienting. And then once you've been here twice, you begin to understand the logic. You see all those boats and pedals there going towards, they bring you up the stairs in the back towards the debating chamber. And it's a very generous space. It's a magical space, really, and that's why you, the media, have taken it over as your space, because it's so beautiful to film.
There we have the exterior view. Big Brother, or certainly BBC cameras, are always watching you. Morales said Scotland is not a land, is a land, not a series of cities. The Parliament sits in the land and shall reflect the land it represents.
Well, you know, it's like a geode, or one of those gems that has many facets. Look at that. If you take some of the rocks you can find in Scotland and break them up, you get these crystalline shapes. And with concrete and silver and that stainless steel, it sparkles like a gem.
There we have the Queen making her way to the MSP's office block.
Also the oak, you can see all of this very broad pieces of oak.
That's very much the signature, isn't it? Oak and sycamore.
Sycamore, yes. And these strange units that
yes,
cantilever.
What is that? What is
that? I forget what that comes
sticking out of the building.
Can't remember what that. We're looking at the MSP office area.
Yes.
And the end of the stairs is about there, so it could be a stair cantilever now. You can see, and I think she's going into the MSP block, if I'm not mistaken.
She's heading towards the MSP offices. One office chosen today is the office of Shona Baird, who's the Green member for North East Scotland. Chosen, I believe, because her office was the most accessible. Shona refused to say that she'd had a quick hoover and dust around this morning or taken anything down from the walls. Or she said, this is a working office and this is how the Queen will find it.
There's that meditation pod that she's going towards, which you're meant to sit in like a monk, and you will look north
that's the exterior.
to the crags.
There's been a mixed reception to those. I read one criticism, but we have to put them to you. They said that, yes, it's a great space if you're a hobbit. Now, I'm tall, and I've plenty of room in there.
They vary in size. I found one that was rather small, but again, they block, you know, those bamboo poles made out of oak, block the view right across the street because the people live there and would look right in on you, so that it shades the sun and it blocks the view there. So your eyes are turned.
She had a bit of a contemplation there. She does look like she's listening intently, enjoying this.
Look at the crafted work around her, the desks, the walls, the oak, the sycamore. I mean, the spaces are completely designed. And you won't find that in most parliaments. It's really the most designed building I know of, contemporary building in the world, probably. Some people say over-designed, too many complex shapes, and that's why I say it's a 14-course dinner. Don't try to gulf it down in one swallow.
Ah, Queen looking at the cupboard space there. All women want lots of cupboards. Do you think there are enough cupboards there?
We live in the paperless office, so-called.
Allegedly. I don't know any office where that's worked. So the Queen having a good look round there. I wonder what the Duke of Edinburgh, what was caught the Duke of Edinburgh's eye. I know there is a poster, Shona tells me there's a poster in Gaelic, an anti-nuclear poster. I wonder if the Duke's trying to decipher that. What is that? Oh, and there's another anti-nuclear one on the window. Now, that's not in Gaelic. I think that's getting its message across. George Reid doing a fine job of being the official guy. There are few people who know more than George.
If you look overhead, you'll just see the vault there. You see?
Oh, yes.
So each MSP has a vaulted cell, as it were, at the end of which is this meditation pod. And that contrasts with the openness of the rest of the building.
A fine view of the sweeping lobby there, isn't it?
With those hanging skylights. Never has a skylight hung down like that in the history of architecture.
Some people argue, though, that it makes the space a bit claustrophobic.
I don't find it there because there's so much light coming from everywhere. I'd say it's more exuberant, generous, optimistic, amusing, and full of surprise.
You're not short of a few good words, are you?
Well, you know, I agree with the poet who saw all those qualities in it. And you'll never run out of things to think about in this building. And that's what a parliament should be. It should always engage the imagination. Imagine the interminable debates that are going to go on in these halls, the wheeling and dealing and so on. And, you know, even parliamentarians have to relax and enjoy themselves to have a more convivial democracy. And I think that was uppermost in Marias's mind when he designed it. He talked about a convivial space. It's a space that is broad and wide rather than tight and oppositional. The English parliaments, you know, sit opposite each other and barrack each other and humiliate each other. Here, it's a very generous sweep, and that is more convivial and more enjoyable. And we're looking up into those upside-down skylights.
And the Queen now heading to the older part of the building, Queensberry House. But we're having a bit of a sneak preview of where she's heading next. It won't look anything like that, believe you me. That's the Donald Dewar reading room. That's all to come, but at the moment the Queen is having a look at a model. There we have a model giving her a sense of just what's happening in this very detailed and complex space. George, if you manage to explain it all in a few seconds, you're a better man than me, because I'm still getting lost in here.
The model shows how it all fits together into the town, and how the shapes of the Parliament relate to the buildings across the street, their fragmented roofs and whiteness. So all sorts of little cues that are picked up. In fact, you can see the way the green jumps across to the cemetery.
Laying turf on the roofs, who'd have thought of it? You spend your life trying to get turf and moss off your roof.
Actually, 6/10 of the scheme is landscape. So
6/10?
yes.
It's enormous.
Yeah, I mean, it's a landscape scheme, and I think for that alone, he hides a lot of the buildings underground, you see.
Indeed,
there.
indeed.
Yeah, yeah.
But as you say, it won't look like that in a few years' time. It'll become more wild, and that's what Morales wanted.
Much more picturesque, much more part of nature. I think it's a rock stuck in a park.
Now the royal party there, meeting Marion and Ian Dewar, the son and daughter of the late First Minister, Donald Dewar. This is the Donald Dewar reading room, as you can see. We've got some of the books out on display, and a lot of them are on shelves. It was thought that rather than a statue or a huge portrait, that this reading room would be a more fitting memorial to a man who lived for his politics and his books. In fact, the design of this room is based on Enrique Morales' own reading room at home. So, in a way, it's a memorial to two men. After his death in the year 2000, Donald's children gifted his books to the Scottish Parliament. Donald was a reader, a collector, a reviewer. And many of the books have the original annotations in the margins, accompanied by notes on House of Commons notepaper, scribbled down and attached to the clippings of the newspaper reviews in which they appeared. I wonder what they're looking at. His tastes were eclectic, never frivolous. David Whitten, his former personal advisor, tells us that he had not one but two sets of the statistics of Scotland. David says that often he'd see Donald on a Friday afternoon with his feet up on the desk, browsing through the latest copy of the Cooper Hay catalogue for rare books and marking up his wish list. I also know that Donald did have 2 copies of Bridget Jones' diary gifted to him after he was recovering from heart surgery, but I think it's unlikely whether he read them. There are many rare books there, I think. The Queen probably pointing out the difference. There are contemporary tomes and rare items. All in all, about 1,800 books will be in this library, which can be used by anyone who works or does the business within the new Scottish Parliament building, and I think by appointment for anyone out there who has a particular interest in antiquarian books. One of Donald's last public duties in September of 2000 was to host a state reception in the Great Hall of Edinburgh Castle for the International League of Antiquarian Booksellers. And he must have enjoyed that.
I think this shows that great architecture needs a great client as well as good architect. And it's the combination of the two that produces a building that takes risks and that brings them off. And I think that Donald Dewar is as important as Marias in making this building happen. Without his leadership, it would have never happened. Without his risk-taking.
It must be a very emotional moment for his children. Their father there inside the building, which is partly his father's legacy and showing his much prized possessions. So the royal party are staying in Queensberry House. We've heard so much about it. Shall we rub in that irony again, shall we? The Duke of Queensberry, who so wanted the union. When the
Duke when the union came about, he went to Parliament, he was pelted with pebbles that you see on the street today, and filth, as they say. So he had to be brought in and escorted in.
And as we can see there, a real, huge view of the Parliament. You can see Edinburgh's Folly, as they call it, up on Calton Hill there. And also, I suppose it's one of the few parliaments in the world that exists in such close proximity with its royal neighbours. There we have the Palace of Holyrood House, looking majestic with Holyrood Abbey. With Holyrood Abbey there, the seat of the monarchs when they're in Scotland. Certainly Crown and government in close proximity in geographical terms. Again, a fine view of the
Yes, doesn't it?
this fifth facade. Is this what you?
Yes.
Is this how you describe it?
Absolutely. Well, the architects describe it as the fifth facade. There we're getting a wonderful view of it. Look at it as a rock outcrop. Look at that as Salisbury crags made out of stainless steel. You'll see what I mean about it picking up metaphors of nature. It's like a flower bursting out, full of exuberance and generosity. There are those funny shapes, the gun shape.
There we are, the Queen now out of Queensberry House and back into the new Parliament. She's meeting some of the staff members there who work in the Parliament. Among them, Jackie Giulianotti, head of the allowances officers. There's a woman to keep in with. And Rosemary Everett, head of visitor and outreach services. David McGill, head of the business team. Ben McCleavey from IT. Typical. You can never get anyone from an IT help desk, and there they are, down there, meeting the Queen when you can't log on. And finally, Bob Shaw, waiting his turn, from Facilities Management. George Reid overseeing the proceedings. So much planning has gone into this day. And everything, so far, I don't want to preempt things, but so far, seems to be going very well indeed. Our man from IT being quizzed by the Duke, as George waits to continue on the next round of the tour. Not long now until the official ceremony, until the Queen enters the magnificent chamber. And of course, lots of entertainment for the ceremony when it comes, but lots of entertainment outside the Parliament as well. It's going to continue throughout the rest of the day.
There are the people sitting as Mariah swatted them to sit on the outside.
And are they meant to use the landscaping then, and not just walk around it and look at it?
Absolutely. It's meant for outdoor rallies. It's as if you took Hyde Park Corner and brought it in to the House of Commons. So it's a debating place. It's in fact the same shape as the debating chamber. So it's...
Is it? Now that's
more or less.
It's passed me by.
It's an
very
extended...
interesting.
Yes, it's one of those fish shapes or boat shapes, broadened. And it would hold, I would think, 10,000 people if it was full up for a pop concert or a political rally. One thing one should remember in this Parliament, although it cost a lot, all parliaments run over budget in the building. This ran over by about 10 times, but a lot of them run over 7, 8 times. And the English Parliament took 17 years to finish, or 93, depending on when you take the finish date. So in a way, although this looks bad in terms of cost overruns and time overruns now, it's actually rather average. And in that sense, I think, in time, the Scots will forget this controversy over cost and see it as value for money.
The Queen making her way up the stairs towards the debating chamber. To enter the chamber, she'll cross a glazed walkway under a stone lintel. I think Brian Taylor knows an awful lot more about that.
Jackie, thanks very much. It's the bit of the building I find the garden lobby the most charming. I find the chamber the most stunning, but the one I find the most enthralling and entrancing is that small stone lintel that you mentioned there, the Queen just coming up towards it. Let me tell you a little bit about it. It's called the Arniston lintel. It's a chunk of stone that was over the entrance to the old Scottish Parliament, the pre-Union one. When that fell into disuse for obvious reasons, it was rescued by the Dundas family and now the Dundas-Becker family. And it's been kept by them at their estate in Arniston House in Midlothian ever since. And they very kindly agreed to gift it back to the Parliament. George Reid, I'm sure, is pointing out exactly that right now. Let's see if we can just sweep round and catch a bit of a shot of it. There it is there, just above our camera now, the Arniston lintel. Now, in some ways, it represents for me just catching the edge of it there, but it represents for me a sense of the connection of the old and the new. When the Queen walks under this lintel now, yes, she's entering the new modern Holyrood, but she's also walking under the archway under which Scotland's old pre-Union parliamentarians would have walked. I just think that's a nice touch. I think that's a nice touch. You can see the Deputy Presiding Officer, Murray Tosh, there explaining some of the ambience around, the light coming in from Holyrood, and if the Queen just glances across there, she can see our own house, Holyrood Palace, just down the road. This is known as the Glass Corridor, another attractive bit of the building. You walk alongside the entirety of the chamber. It's rather steep. It's gently sloping, perhaps, rather than steep. Brian, correct yourself. But the Queen is walking up there along with George Reid. And as you come up there, you then sweep round. You're walking round the entirety of the outside of the chamber. It's a walkway around the chamber. And you then sweep round and come in among the parliamentarians who are waiting inside. And I can tell you what they've been up to. Like all good parliamentarians on a grand day like this, they've been taking photographs of each other. They've been gathering souvenirs and standing in little groups, listening, of course, to the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, who are providing the entertainment. But they've been taking little snaps. And you know something? Eddie Reader, who's going to be singing today, I think I saw one MSP snatching an autograph from Eddie Reader. No doubt he would claim it was for his daughters or sons, but certainly there was a bit of autograph hunting going on as well. But it is a big day for them as well. The MSPs have taken their hits as a consequence of this building. Just the sense slightly, a little, from what Charles Jenks was saying about the cost. Yes, it's gone up 10 times from the estimate of 40 million, which was in the white paper, but that was a guesstimate based upon a building anywhere, a particular, not a non-specific building anywhere. The actual first estimate for Holyrood per se was 100 million. It's gone up 4 times. There, just what we were talking about. There's Alex Salmond, an ex-member of the Scottish Parliament. He rather hopes to get back here at some point. Of course, he's now a member of Parliament, taking a little snap of the day, wearing the White Rose of Scotland, referred to by Hugh MacDiarmid in his poem of that name. The nationalists, as you recall, perhaps on the opening day when Parliament gains its powers in the 1st of July 1999, they wore the White Rose then. Me, silly me, I thought it was a Jacobite rose, but Alex Salmond put me right. He said it's the White Rose of Scotland, as referred to by MacDiarmid. There's all the members. There's Lord James having a bit of a smile to himself, sitting next to Phil Galley. His brother, the Duke of Hamilton, of course, is the hereditary keeper of Holyrood House and is carrying the crown with great solemnity today on its procession down here. That's the other side, the Conservative benches, you can see. And now the fanfare. Holyrood, the mace carrier there. He's the gaffer of security here. Former serving officer, serving soldier in the Black Watch. He's wearing the Braveheart tartan for the day, carrying in the mace as the sounds of the fanfare by Aaron Copeland. Fanfare for the common man. A reflection, no doubt, of the spirit of this ceremony, and a reflection perhaps too of that ceremony 5 years ago when Sheena Wellington sang "A Man's a Man for All That." Here comes the beginning of the procession now, the beginning of the royal entrance. mace, we have the crown, and now we have the presiding officer with a welcome in both English and Gaelic.
Your Majesty, our Queen of Scots, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, people of Scotland, welcome to Holyrood, welcome to the new Scots Parliament. Fáilte go dtí an Roch, fáilte go Parliament Urna Hallapa. Our predecessors in the old Scots Parliament began their business with an unaccompanied metrical psalm. So too, in that tradition, do we today, in Gaelic, in the first language of Scotland. I to the hills will lift mine eyes.
simply wonderful.
Your Majesty, that
Senator
Gallic
Callum
psalm
Lewis.
exhorts the people to come to the city, to the place where the laws are made, a place that shapes the future, a place where to the hills we can lift our eyes, as we do in this chamber, and look forward with ambition and with confidence. A place where the ears of the politicians are open to the voices of the people. Today, the folk of Scotland have come to the city, to the place where the laws are made, in a tradition that stretches back at least 5 centuries. We come together, people, Parliament, Palace, as the community of this realm. We meet at Holyrood in a World Heritage Site where 1,000 years of history in the Royal Mile fuses with our land. Long before any of us in the green of what is now Holyrood Park came Arthur's Seat and the Salisbury Crags, formed 350 million years ago in the volcanic eruptions which gave shape to Scotland. Iron and Bronze Age families lived here. Our early kings, Mary, Queen of Scots, James VI, Bonnie Prince Charlie, Adam Smith, David Hume, the economists, philosophers, and scientists of the Scottish Enlightenment, which largely invented the modern world, have all, on their way down the Canongate, been here before us. In his inner sanctum on this site, the Duke of Queensberry plotted the end of the old Scots Parliament. That room is now in a neat rounding of history where the presiding officer of the new Scottish Parliament does his work. So this building, designed like the leaves of a plant whose green stems stretch out towards the hills, is both rooted in our land and intertwined with Scotland's story. Holyrood does not stand apart in splendid isolation. Our architecture is domestic, not patrician. Our people live right beside us, across the road, a residence for old soldiers. Next door, the children of the Canongate School in their playground. Round the corner, opposite the palace, our doors open to the 800,000 guests, the majority of them Scots, whom we expect in the next year. This Parliament belongs to its people. It has been built to invite them in. Designed, said Enrique Morales, as a place of shared conversation, not of sterile confrontation. It's a place where together we can be ambitious for Scotland, where we face the challenge of building a country comfortable with itself at home and at ease with itself in Britain, Europe, and the wider world. An enterprising and a compassionate Scotland, a place where now with devolution, if we make mistakes, there are mistakes, and we can no longer blame anyone else. A place where we know the enemy and have the wisdom to understand that often it is us. A Scotland where we face our fear of failure, where we confront that Caledonian cringe that merely reinforces doubt, where we are not prisoners of our past, but the cause of what happens next. There are plenty of voices sent to us by the readers of our local newspapers to spur us on. Alexander Gray, "This is my country, the land that begat me." Hugh MacDermott, "Our Scotland small, our multiform, our infinite Scotland small." And the Proclaimers, in an echo of Robert Burns, "We're all Scotland's story, and we're all worth the same." Our land and history have shaped us as an egalitarian society, reflected in our funding principles of accessibility, accountability, equality of opportunities, and the sharing of power between our government, our parliament, and our people. These are the real foundation stones of this new Parliament. If we listen to the building, it will help us. This is not a place where, like Westminster, we sit two swords' lengths apart. It's a campus where committees are as important as the chamber. It's a village, a cluster of different spaces designed for dialogue. And it says to all, to our wealth creators, to our thinkers, to Civic and Volunteer Scotland, to the whole community of this realm, it says, come on in. This, then, is the place where Scotland's horizons should be stretched, not squeezed. Our new Scottish Parliament building, as our First Minister put it, is not an end in itself. It's simply a means to greater ends. For it's here at Holyrood, in Donald Duer's words, that we Scots of this and of future generations will say who we are and how we carry ourselves in the world.
The presiding officer, George Reid, the presiding officer there, a fine evocation of the political trade, majestic oratory, and yet the democratic spirit too. And now we're to hear Wild Mountainside, performed by Eddie Reader.
Is within grasp, hear the highlands call. The last mile is upon us. I'll carry you if you fall. I know the armor's heavy now. I know the heart inside. It's beautiful, just roaming the wild mountainside. Snow is falling all over, out to clear blue skies. Crow is flying high over. You and I are gonna wander high up where the air is rare. Wild horses ride. It's beautiful, just over the wild mountainside. Wild and free we roam, only a mile to go. Wild and free we roam, only a mile to go. Beauty is within grasp, hear the islands call. The last mile is upon us. I'll carry you if you fall. I know the armor's heavy now. I know the heart inside. It's beautiful, let's go over the wild mountainside. It's beautiful, just over the wild mountainside. Let's go over, let's go roaming.
Kelly Reader singing there a song by her Ayrshire contemporary Joan Douglas. As you've probably guessed by now, it's a song about calling to the exiles of Scotland, how Scotland tugs at the heart and calls you home. And next, the main event, the Queen to open the Holyrood building.
Presiding Officer, First Minister, members of the Scottish Parliament. Thank you for inviting me to address you here today. As you have said, Presiding Officer, this is the place where the land of Scotland and its people come together. Building a parliament to meet that goal, fit for the 21st century and beyond, has been a unique challenge. It was Winston Churchill who commented, when the House of Commons had to be reconstructed after the Second World War, "We shape our buildings and they shape us." In Holyrood, you have drawn not just on your own heritage, but on the best parliamentary traditions of Westminster, the Commonwealth and Europe. We meet in a remarkably open and transparent chamber, where this Parliament sits in the round in European fashion. The mace reminds us that your procedures follow British and Commonwealth models. The honours of Scotland remain powerful symbols of the history and heritage which unites the communities of this land. These communities, Scotland's people, are its enduring strength. At a time when politicians around the world wonder how to draw closer to those they represent, I was particularly moved this morning by watching all those who proudly made their way down the Royal Mile, people from every walk of Scottish life. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the task of this Parliament to give voice to the hopes of all these people, their families and their friends. This Parliament has been shaped to invite them in, to listen to them and to speak up for them. It is now your responsibility, in their service, to take advantage of everything that this remarkable building has to offer, channeling aspirations, resolving conflicting views, moulding the future of Scotland. Certainly, this new Parliament building has had a difficult and controversial birth. But that is all the more reason to ensure that with the energy, flair and determination for which Scots are renowned the world over, Holyrood comes to be seen as a landmark of 21st century democracy, built securely on the foundations of accessibility, accountability, equality of opportunity and partnership, setting new standards of bringing people and Parliament together. There is much in which this Parliament and Scotland's people can already take pride. Over the past 5 years, more than 1,000 parliamentarians from around the world have come to Edinburgh to see your principles being put into practice. In your procedures, you are pioneering new forms of working in close association with those you represent. In doing so, you add distinctive Scottish values to the British democratic tradition. Ladies and gentlemen, in addressing this Parliament in the past, I have spoken of my faith in your commitment to the service of the people of Scotland. It is a pleasure to renew that faith here in your new home. The Duke of Edinburgh joins me in wishing you every success in your deliberations in the years to come.
And with those words, the MSPs whom you see there are being given their mission statement, if you like. As Jack McConnell said, we're in now, we have to live up to the new building. The next event is a performance by Nicola Benedetti, the BBC Young Musician of the Year. really like that. Now, she's played before, hasn't she? Nicola Benedetti, BBC Young Musician of the Year. She won that award in May this year at the age of 16. That was Saint-Saëns' Capriccio, Rondo Capriccioso. Very appropriate, I think, for a very capricious building. Now, I'm looking forward to the next bit. I really enjoyed that, I must say, but I'm also looking forward to the next bit, which is to be a poem by Edward Morgan. Oh, they really like that. It's the Royal Scottish National Orchestra getting to the feet there to applaud that performance by Nicola Benedetti, the Young Musician of the Year. As I said, looking forward to the next bit, a poem by Edwin Morgan, read by Liz Lochhead in honour of the new building.
By our Poet Laureate, our Scots Macker, Edwin Morgan, on whose behalf I am proud to read this today. Open the doors, light of the day shine in, light of the mind shine out. We have a building which is more than a building. There is a commerce between inner and outer, between brightness and shadow, between the world and those who think about the world. Is it not a mystery? The parts cohere. They come together like petals of a flower, yet they also send their tongues outward to feel and taste the teeming earth. Did you want classic columns and predictable pediments? A growl of old Gothic grandeur? A blissfully boring box? Not here. No thanks. No icon, no IKEA, no iceberg, but curves and caverns, nooks and niches, huddles and heavens, syncopations and surprises. Leave symmetry to the cemetery, but bring together slate and stainless steel, black granite and grey granite, seasoned oak and sycamore, concrete blonde and smooth as silk. The mix is almost alive. It breathes and beckons. Imperial marble it is not. Come down the mile, into the heart of the city, past the kirk of St. Giles and the closes and wines of the noted ghosts of history who drank their claret and fell down the steep tenement stairs into the arms of link boys, but who wrote and taught the starry enlightenment of their days. And before them, the old mackers who tickled a Scottish king's ear with melody and ribaldry and frank advice. And when you are there, down there, in the midst of things, not set upon an hill with your nose in the air, this is where you know your parliament should be, and this is where it is, just here. What do the people want of the place? They want it to be filled with thinking persons as open and adventurous as its architecture. A nest of Fiertes is what they do not want. A symposium of procrastinators is what they do not want. A phalanx of forelock tuggers is what they do not want. And perhaps, above all, the droopy mantra of "it wasna me" is what they do not want. Dear friends, dear lawgivers, dear parliamentarians, you are picking up a thread of pride and self-esteem that has been almost but not quite, oh no, not quite, not ever broken or forgotten. When you convene, you will be reconvening with a sense of not wholly the power, not yet wholly the power, but a good sense of what was once in the honour of your grasp. All right, forget or don't forget the past. Trumpets and robes are fine, but in the present and the future, you will need something more. What is it? We, the people, cannot tell you yet, but you will know about it when we do tell you. We give you our consent to govern. Don't pocket it and ride away. We give you our deepest, dearest wish to govern well. Don't say we have no mandate to be so bold. We give you this great building. Don't let your work and hope be other than great when you enter and begin. So now begin. Open the doors and begin.
That's it. That's it. That's the gloriously gallus moment we've been waiting for. Liz Lochhead herself, a wonderful poet and dramatist, reading Edwin Morgan's poem. Edwin Morgan, of course, is 84. He's in living in a home in Glasgow. He couldn't be here himself today.
On behalf of the people of Scotland, I thank you for the honour of your presence here today. And I would also like to thank, on behalf of everyone, those who've performed for Scotland in this chamber. A chamber at the heart of our new Scottish Parliament building. It is a heart that should beat with the pulse of the nation and resound with the passion of Scotland. This chamber, a triumph of design and engineering, is the place Scotland's Parliament can now call home. At the opening of our Parliament in 1999, Donald Dewar said that devolution, once a dream, was now a reality. Today, that reality is manifest in steel and concrete, in wood and glass. The road to completion has been a difficult one. The strength of our new democracy has been tested. But we have matured more quickly than many expected and encountered sorrows and challenges along the way that no one could have anticipated. After 5 years, our young Parliament can now take up occupation of this, the permanent address. This is a building to which we have come amid debate and controversy. The Scots are, as the late Willie Ross once said, a disputatious people. And indeed we were true to that trait as we brought this building to life. But it is now accepted without dispute that this is the permanent home for the nation's final discussion on matters that affect the way we live and the way we shape the lives of future generations. But this building is not the Scottish Parliament. This magnificent building can inspire admiration for its design and its detail, but it cannot by its mere existence influence opinions or judgments on public policy. It is we who are elected to serve who form the human institution that is the Scottish Parliament. It is how we perform our duties, how we advance or inhibit the progress of this nation in our conduct and the decisions that we make that will chart the future course of Scotland. Your Majesty, we have a new building in a new century in a world that has changed greatly since you graced us with your presence in 1999. Then the world felt safer than ever before, but now the threat from global terrorism hangs over us. Since then, life sciences, digital technology and renewable energy have developed almost beyond recognition. And as we look to the future, we can see a world that will change faster still. That is why we should not just deal with the challenges of today. In Scotland, in this Parliament, we must imagine what the future will hold. The pace of progress is quickening, and the possibilities for us are limitless. This Parliament should dare to open minds to the opportunities that change brings, and seize those opportunities for the people of Scotland. So in the words of our national poet, let us all be thinking persons. Let us all be open and adventurous. Most of all, let us be confident that we do live in a country of great talent and opportunity, of enterprise and of compassion and tolerance too. And let us indeed pick up that thread of pride and self-esteem and make our nation proud again. For we have much to be proud of. Scotland's contribution to the world far outweighs our size. Scottish scientists, philosophers, economists, engineers, explorers and artists have made their mark on history. And still today, Scottish scientists and engineers are inventing and creating the 21st century world. Our artists, musicians and our entrepreneurs stretch our imagination and expand our potential. And our young people have a confidence and ambition seldom seen in recent generations. There is a spring in Scotland's step again, and I, for one, felt it today as we came down the Royal Mile. Your Majesty, your support for this institution has been appreciated. We are grateful for your good wishes, and we wish you well in all you do for our country. 5 years ago, Scotland found a new voice in the land. Today we celebrate a new confidence in the country, a permanent Parliament within which to announce our ambitions, encourage our enterprise and fight for fairness. We have a new building that will be the envy of many the world over. But today, more than anything, we have a Parliament that has come of age in a country whose time has come.
parliament that has come of age in a country whose time has come. And now,
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne, for old lang syne, my Joe, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet, for old lang syne, we twa here run up to praise and put the gowans fine. We've wandered many's a weary fert since all lang syne. We twa he paddled in the barn from morning sun till dawn. Now seas between us broad have rolled since all lang syne, for old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet, for old lang syne. Will you sing it with us? Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days lang syne, for old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet, for old lang syne. Offer each other a hand, and here's a hand, my trusty friend, and gives a hand o' thine. We'll take a ride, get well walk, for old lang syne, for old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll
Superb. I saw there at one point the Labour benches stretching out to join the SNP benches. That song often ends an event. It ends this particular event, but who knows? It might just signal the beginning of something. I like the way also that Eddie Reader sang the old, and in my view, the better song, the better version, musical version for Auld Lang Syne, but when she got the audience to join in. It was a traditional favourite that got them going. The hands reaching across the political divide there as well, not a thing one commonly sees. Wasn't that simply magnificent? I defy the cynics to comment upon that with scepticism or a downhearted view. There's Benedicta, she enjoys it. Standing next to her there is Brian Stewart of RMGM, who was being praised earlier in the comments. Brian Stewart's taken some fair old brickbats for this building, but he's the one that's pulled it together. I think he's a bit of a local hero on the day myself as well. Fanfare there was Listen Up by Gareth Wood, played of course by the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, who have performed throughout this ceremony. The MSP still standing in their places with the royal party, pursuivants, archers and all gone from the chamber as they reflect on the events that have just taken place, the ceremony that's just taken place. A ceremony I think summed up, that was Sean Connery, I wonder what he made of it. Sean Connery relaxing as the rest of the audience do now that the ceremony is over, but I think it was a combination of I think George Reid got it best in some ways, a combination of the democratic intellect but also the majesty of the day. Her Majesty, of course, the Queen present, but the democratic intellect very much on display, from the fanfare for the common man at the beginning to the remarks in George Reid's speech, the suggestions from Jack McConnell. There's Jack McConnell congratulating Eddie Reader there upon what was a splendid performance, both of the song she sang herself about the longings of expatriate Scots for home and also in Auld Lang Syne.
Brian, the Queen may have left the debating chamber, but she has still some official duties to perform.
She does indeed. Oh, there's Sean Connery reaching down to congratulate a couple of friends, and Alex Salmon behind him. The Queen heads on from here to have a bit of a look at the one bit of the building she hasn't seen, which is one of my favourite bits, the committee rooms, where the roofs they're not just made, they're sculpted, and after that she has to perform the task of opening a silver sculpture.
Yes, its design is based on the honours of Scotland, the sword, sceptre and crown, the oldest royal regalia in Britain. Louise Batchelor has been hearing from the man who made it.
It was heavy, strenuous work, but it had to be very exact, very precise, because the angles and the curves are all interdependent.
It's the most prestigious commission of Graham Stewart's career. The brief to design a large, impressive silver sculpture for the new Scottish Parliament building, making reference to the honours of Scotland. The three honours, the crown, the sword and the sceptre, are the oldest royal regalia in Britain and date back to the 15th and 16th centuries. The incorporation of goldsmiths of the city of Edinburgh took this as their theme when they commissioned the new sculpture and invited silversmiths to compete for it last winter. Graham's winning design intertwines the three main symbols with some additional twists.
The recessed oak leaves were made reference to the common element which is in the crown, the sword and the sceptre. The motif which you find throughout all of them is the oak leaf.
The grit, determination and humour.
5 years ago, the Queen presented a silver mace made in southwest Scotland to the new Parliament. This second gift, created by a Dunblane silversmith, takes pride of place in the entrance hall to the new building.
It certainly does. Well, just time for a few final thoughts. Roddy, billed as a Parliament for the people. Do you think the ceremony today lived up to that?
Celebration of dignity and style, and I want to see much more of that in the future.
Charles, will this building be an enduring landmark?
No question people will come to Edinburgh now to see the building as well as all the other things.
So in a way, perhaps all the advanced publicity may well have worked in its favour. There's a bit of a curiosity.
Well, there's a rebound, isn't there? When you've been criticising and naysaying and carping, and suddenly opinion swings the other way, and I think we've seen it swing today.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this historic day. Today, Holyrood has been the star of the show. It now resumes its workaday role as the home of Scotland's democracy. And we'll soon find out if the Scottish Parliament fulfills that hope that we heard about today of a fresh start. This morning, the capital and the country have given a warm welcome to the new Parliament. I hope you have enjoyed the celebrations, aspirational and at times emotional. We'll leave you with the words of Donald Dewar, who said at the Parliament's inception in 1999, "This is not an end, but a means to a greater end. Only time will tell." From all of us here, goodbye.
Well, if you came late to today's events or just fancy reliving the best bits all over again, then turn to BBC 2 Scotland tomorrow afternoon at 5:30 for highlights of today's royal opening ceremony.